For they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Such pure devotees are better known as vice lords according to revealed scriptures. The sincere disciple of the pure devotee considers the spiritual master equal to the Lord, but always considers himself to be a humble servant of the Lord. This is the pure devotional path. Kova bhagavatas tasya punyaslokinya karmana siddhikamo nasrinuyad yasha kali malapaham. Swaha. Who is there desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of quarrel, who is not willing to hear the virtuous glories of the Lord? The age of Kali is most condemned age due to its quarrelsome features. Kali Yuga is so saturated with vicious habits that there is a great fight at the slightest misunderstanding. Those who are engaged in a pure devotional service of the Lord, who are without any desire for self-aggrandizement, and who are freed from the effects of fruitive actions and dry philosophical speculations, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of this complicated age. The leaders of the people are very much anxious to live in peace and friendship, but they have no information of the simple method of hearing the glories of the Lord. On the contrary, such leaders are opposed to the propagation of the glories of the Lord. In other words, the foolish leaders want to completely deny the existence of the Lord. In the name of secular state, such leaders are enacting various plans every year, but by the insurmountable intricacies of the material nature of the Lord, all these plans for progress are being constantly frustrated. They have no eyes to see that their attempts at peace and friendship are failing. But here is the hint to get over the hurdle. If we want actual peace, we must open the road to understanding of the Supreme Lord Krishna and glorify him for his virtuous activities as they are depicted in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tasya karmani udarani pratigritani suribihi bruhita shadadhanavan lilaya dahata kala. His transcendental acts are magnificent and gracious, and great learned sages like Narada sing of them. Please therefore speak to us who are eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. Vayam tuna vritipyama uttama sloka vikrame yatshinvatam rasagyanam swaduswada pade pade. Swaha. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with him relish hearing of his pastimes at every moment. Kritavan kila karamani saharamena keshava atimatyani bhagavan gudha kapatamanusaha. Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, along with Balaram, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. Kalyam agatam agnaya chitrismin vishnave vayam asina jikta satrena katayam saksana hare swaha. Knowing well that the age of Kali had already begun, we are assembled here in this holy place to hear at great length the transcendental message of Godhead, and in this way perform sacrifice. Tvamna sadarsito datra dustaram nisitir satam kalim satvaharam pumsam karnadara ivarnavam. We think that we have met your goodness by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all the good qualities of a human being. The age of Kali is very dangerous for the human being. Human life is simply meant for self-realization, but due to this dangerous age, men have completely forgotten the aim of life. In this age, the lifespan will gradually decrease, people will gradually lose their memory, finer sentiments, strength, and better qualities. A list of the anomalies for this age is given in the 12th canto of this work. And so this age is very difficult for those who want to utilize this life for self-realization. The people are so busy with sense gratification that they completely forget about self-realization. Out of madness, they frankly say that there is no need for self-realization because they do not realize that this brief life is but a moment on our great journey towards self-realization. The whole system of education is geared to sense gratification, and if a learned man thinks it over, he sees that the children of this age are being intentionally sent to the slaughterhouses of so-called education. Learned men, therefore, must be cautious of this age, and if they at all want to cross over the dangerous ocean of Kali, they must follow the footsteps of the sages of Naimisharanya and accept Sri Suta Goswami or his bona fide representative as the captain of the ship. The ship is the message of Lord Sri Krishna in the shape of Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bruhi Yogeshware Krishna Brahmanye Dharmavarmani Swam Kashtam Adhuno Pete Dharmakam Sharanam Gata. Since Sri Krishna, the Absolute Truth, the Master of all mystic powers, has departed for his own abode, please tell us to whom the religious principles have now gone for shelter. Essentially, religion is the prescribed codes enunciated by the personality of Godhead himself. Whenever there is a gross misuse or neglect of the principles of religion, the Supreme Lord appears himself to restore religious principles. This is stated in Bhagavad Gita. Here, the sages of Naimisharanya are inquiring about these principles. The reply to this question is given later. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the transcendental sound representation of the personality of Godhead, and thus it is the full representation of transcendental knowledge and religious principles. Thus send the Bhaktivinoda to purports of the first canto, first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Questions by the Sages. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavani Paskatya Desatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vaita Gadadhar Shri Vasani Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. So Madhava Chandra Prabhu is going to speak to us about a special verse that he especially appreciates. It's in the chapter 18, text number 48, 47, 48. Yeah. This is backwards.
I have it here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 18, titled Maharaj Parikshit cursed by a Brahmana boy. So actually we are going to read verse 47 and 48. So the context here is that we all know Parikshit Maharaj, actually one time he was in the forest. Actually he was very thirsty and hungry, and then he was looking for water. So he went into the ashram where Samik Rishi was like meditating. He was in Samadhi. And then he walks in, and then there is nobody to receive him. He was very hungry and thirsty. And then he got frustrated with hunger and thirst. And then, so there was nobody to give water. He got a little upset, and then he took a snake and put it on the neck of Samik Rishi and left. And then later, this news was given to Samik Rishi's son, Shringi, a small Brahmana boy. And then he hears this, the act of Maharaj Parikshit. And then he becomes immediately angry, and then he starts calling ill names to Parikshit Maharaj. He is a dog and he is upstart, and how can he do this? So he cannot do like this to my father. See what I am going to do. And then he touched the water, and then he cursed him to die in 7 days. He will be bitten by a snake bird, and then he will die. So, and then after that the boy realizes that he had done something wrong. So out of anger, out of inexperience, so he had Brahmanical power, but he misused the Brahmanical power. And then he basically starts crying, and then comes towards the ashram. When he comes to the ashram in front of his father is still in Samadhi. And then he cries. After hearing his son's cry, the father comes out of the trance, and so he looks at the snake on his neck. It's a dead snake, so he is not bothered. He just takes the snake and throws it away. And then he asks the boy, so what had happened? And then the boy immediately tells what had happened. So Parikshit had come, and then he put the snake, and then he cursed Parikshit. So after hearing this, Samik Rishi is very disturbed by his son's behavior, because his son's behavior is inappropriate. Because it was for a small mistake done by Parikshit Maharaj, the behavior of his son was not appropriate. For the small offense, he had cursed him to die. So immediately he knows that actually his son acted out of inexperience. And then he tells him that whatever you have done is wrong, because this king is the ruler of the entire kingdom, and he is above all these things, because he represents the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he is supposed to be protected, not cursed. For the small mistake, insignificant mistake he had done, what the boy had done is wrong, he says that. And then later he tells, because of whatever you had done, right, the whole monarchy system is going to be abolished because of this your behavior. And then alternate to the monarchy is going to be the democratic system is going to come in. And then because of this democratic system, what is going to happen to the whole society, how the whole society is going to degrade. He tells all those things, and then he glorifies Maharaj Parikshit, his great qualities. And then he knows that Maharaj Parikshit is capable of counter-cursing his son, and then stop the curse given by the Brahmana boy. But he doesn't react to that, because Maharaj Parikshit takes this with humility, that he is not insulted by this whole thing. He takes it humbly as this is a mercy of the Lord. And then we all know that the whole thing is enacted by Lord Krishna, so that Bhagavatam can be spoken, and then Parikshit Maharaj can go back to spiritual world quickly. That is the whole reason whole pastimes is happening. The whole thing is enacted by Krishna. And then by understanding this, Samik Rishi is a very experienced person, so he understands what had happened, and then he knows that nothing can be done because Maharaj Parikshit is not going to counter curse. So he prays to the Supreme Lord. That's the verse we are going to read, the 47th verse. Apepshushva bhrutyeshu balayena buddhina papam kritam tat bhagavan sarvatma kshantum arhati. So then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of Godhead to pardon his immature boy, who had no intelligence and who had committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate, who deserved to be protected. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Swami Ki Jai. Everyone is responsible, purport, everyone is responsible for his own action, either pious or sinful. Rishi Shamika could foresee that his son had committed a great sin by cursing Maharaja Parikshit, who deserved to be protected by the Brahmanas, for he was a pious ruler and completely free from all sins, because of his being a first-class devotee of the Lord. When an offense is done unto the devotee of the Lord, it is very difficult to overcome the reaction. The Brahmanas, being at the head of the social orders, are meant to give protection to the subordinates and not to curse them. There are occasions when a Brahmana may furiously curse a subordinate Kshatriya or Vaishya, etc. But in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, there were no grounds, as already explained. Here we can understand Prabhupada is explaining that actually the king is supposed to be protected by the Brahmanas. So you might wondering how the Brahmanas can protect the king. We know that the Kshatriyas protect everybody. Kshatriyas is supposed to protect everybody. Then how come the Brahmanas can protect Kshatriyas? So Kshatriyas protect the general public using weapons, astra, whereas the Brahmana protect the Kshatriya using shastra. They have to be educated. The Kshatriyas have to be trained from the scriptures. The Brahmanas read the scriptures and train the king to become a Rajarishi. A king is not just a king. King has to be trained. King is not the one who just goes to the war and fight and collects taxes and then enjoys. King is supposed to be trained by the Brahmanas to become a Rajarishi so that he can protect the subject from the danger of neighboring kingdoms as well as the danger of the subject's mind, because everybody's mind is going to be corrupting people. So the king makes sure that not only he protects physically, he engages the subject according to the proper varna and dharma so that people, they discharge their prescribed duties. That is the purpose of the king. The king not only just protects the subject, he protects the subject also from not doing their duty. So that's how, so what is to do, what is not to do, that comes from the scripture. The Brahmanas read this information and then train the Kshatriyas. So that's how the Brahmanas protect. In this case, actually, Maharaj Parikshit is not just a Kshatriya. He is a great devotee. So he knows what to do, what not to do. And he is supposed to be protected, he is supposed to be respected. So the behavior of the Brahmana boy is not accurate. So that's why, like Samik Rishi is saying that what you did is wrong. And then here Prabhupada further explains that Parikshit, the foolish boy, had done it out of sheer vanity in being a Brahmana's son. And thus he became liable to be punished by the law of God. The Lord never forgives a person who condemns his pure devotee. Therefore, by cursing a king, the foolish Shringi had committed not only a sin, but also the greatest offense. Therefore, the Rishi could foresee that only Supreme Personality of Godhead could save his boy from his sinful act. He therefore directly prayed for pardon from the Supreme Lord, who alone can undo a thing which is impossible to change. The appeal was made in the name of a foolish boy who had developed no intelligence at all. Just before this verse, actually Samik Rishi tells that to his boy, by your behavior, not only you are condemned, our whole community, the whole Brahmana class will be condemned for this behavior. So now somebody might ask the question. So there are two questions Prabhupada further explains. So a question may be raised here in that since it was the desire of the Lord that Parikshit Maharaj be put in that awkward position so that he might be delivered from material existence, then why was a Brahmana's son made responsible for this offensive act? The answer is that the offensive act was performed by a child only so that he could be excused very easily, and thus the prayer of the father was accepted. But if the question is raised why the whole Brahmana community as a whole was made responsible for allowing Kali into the world affairs, the answer is given in the Varaha Purana, that the demons who acted inimically towards the personality of Godhead but were not killed by the Lord were allowed to take birth in the families of Brahmanas to take advantage of the age of Kali. The all-merciful Lord gave them a chance to have their birth in the families of pious Brahmanas so that they could progress towards salvation. But the demons, instead of utilizing the good opportunity, misused the Brahmanical culture due to being puffed up by the vanity in becoming Brahmanas. The typical example is the son of Samik Rishi. and all the foolish sons of Brahmanas are warned hereby not to become foolish as Sringi and be always on guard against the demonic qualities which they had in their previous births. The foolish boy was of course excused by the Lord, but others who may not have a father like Shamika Rishi will be put into great difficulty if they misuse the advantage obtained by birth in a Brahmana family. Here we can understand how the Kali Yuga starts degrading. In the previous Yuga, all the demons who were not killed by the Supreme Lord, they were given opportunity in the Kali Yuga to take birth in the Brahmanical family. The reason is two. There are two reasons why they are allowed to take birth. One, they are given an opportunity to correct themselves so that they can go towards liberation. If they don't do, they will be the one perpetrating the advancement of Kali. Through them, Kali will manifest. They will misuse the scripture. They will misuse the ordinary people. And because of that, the Kali Yuga is going to advance. So that's why Prabhupada is warning here. Just because somebody have taken birth in the Brahmanical family, one shouldn't be puffed up. One should become very careful. One should guard against the demonic qualities. What are the demonic qualities? As Prabhu explained in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it's very nicely explained. So Damba, right? One of the things is to be proud. So that's why people generally take birth in higher caste. Generally they are proud of the birth. So that is actually not a proper behavior. Just because we have taken birth in a higher family, one should not just become proud of that. One should become humble and engage in devotional service. In the next verse, again, Samik Rishi explains, the devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Rishi Shamika also knew that the Lord does not forgive a person who had committed an offense at the feet of a devotee. The Lord can only give direction to take shelter of the devotee. He thought within himself that if Maharaj Parikshita would counter curse the boy, he might be saved. But he knew also that a pure devotee is careless about worldly advantages or reverses. As such, the devotees are never inclined to counteract personal defamation, curses, negligence, etc. As far as such things are concerned, in personal affairs, the devotees do not care for them. But in the case of their being performed against the Lord and his devotees, then the devotees take very strong action. It was a personal affair, and therefore Samika Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. Thus, there was no alternative than to place an appeal to the Lord for the immature boy. It is not only that the Brahmanas are powerful enough to award curses or blessings upon the subordinates. The devotee of the Lord, even though he may not be a Brahmana, is more powerful than a Brahmana. But a powerful devotee never misuses the power for personal benefit. Whatever power the devotee may have is always utilized in service towards the Lord and his devotees only. Again, we can understand that the devotee's position is superior to the Brahmana. Actually, the devotees are above the four varnas. They transcended because they are engaged in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hence, they have more power than the Brahmana. Here Prabhupada is explaining. He might have taken birth in a lawyer family. Just because he is worshipping, executing pure devotional service, he is more powerful than a Brahmana. Hence, here Maharaj Parikshit is capable of counter-cursing the boy, but he does not do it. Out of his humility, he takes the whole incident as he first repents. In the later chapter we can understand, he first repents for the mistake what he had done. He realizes that he did the mistake of putting the snake on Shamika Rishi when he was hungry and thirsty. He didn't know what he was doing. He was pushed by his senses. And then he did the mistake. Later, once he goes back to the palace, he realizes the mistake he does and he actually laments. Later he says that let my whole kingdom be burnt away from me. Let the whole kingdom be taken away from me. Like that he prays. He laments for the whole incident. So, because of his humility, he does not counter curse the boy. So that actually Samik Rishi understands. So here further explained, the devotees, even though they are empowered with higher power, they do not misuse the power. They only use it in service to the Lord. Actually, this is a very, very important point for all the practicing devotees, especially if you are put in a position by the authorities to serve in the mission. You have to imbibe this mood. Anybody who gets affected for personal things, that person is not suitable to serve in the mission. One has to be, if somebody says something personal defamation, one should take humble position. Whereas when somebody commits offense towards the Lord or his devotees, one should take severe action. So this is an important mood for a practicing devotee to be in the mission. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop here. Harivilas Prabhu will continue. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. This is a very nice presentation. So, to summarize that nice presentation, the devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. So, how can you be like that? It's only if you have such a reservoir of Krishna consciousness and you're very secure in your faith and your understanding of Krishna. It's the only way you can be like that. Like one time I was with Prabhupada and he gave a long harangue against the scientists, calling them rascals and all kinds of names, and really making them look like fools. And of course I was a new devotee at that time, and this was on a morning walk, and I was just stunned. I had never heard anyone call scientists rascals. In fact, I had gone to school, graduated from college, and I had great respect for science. So I asked Prabhupada, I said, Prabhupada, I've never in my life met a person that has condemned the scientists like you just did. And he looked at me and said, yes. He said, I can do that. He said, do you know why I can do that? And I didn't want to say anything. I said, no. And he said, because I know Krishna is behind everything. I know this. I know this. I know this. Therefore I can do it. Well, that's a very interesting answer. The scientists, many of them, are trying to purport that there's nobody behind nature. It'll happen by accident. And Prabhupada is emphatically saying, I know who's behind it. Krishna is behind everything. Therefore I can do this. Therefore I can call them rascals. Well, let's think about that statement. Let's say you're an expert in something. Just like sometimes women are experts in keeping the house clean, cooking nice things, worshiping the deity. Then the husband comes home and he's looking around for something to eat, and he grabs something out of the refrigerator. And the wife comes and said, what are you doing? That's not offered. How can you just take it out of the refrigerator? You have to offer it first. And you didn't even take a bath, nothing. I said, look, I'm hungry. He said, okay, you just wait till I offer it. Now, you would say, well, why is she getting so upset? Because she knows that one should offer things first before they eat it. And she knows that the process of offering requires a lot of attention and devotion. And she knows that Krishna is pleased. If he's pleased by the offering, then he offers back as his prasadam. So she sees that there's a great mistake being made. by just grabbing something out of the refrigerator and eating it. Whereas someone who's nonchalant, who likes laissez-faire philosophy, hey, so what's the big thing? Okay, so I'll go like this, touch to my head, and I'll eat. Krishna says, Yajnasistastina santo muchyante sarvakilbasai bunjate tvagam papam ye pachanti atmakaranat. Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, 13th verse. The devotees of their Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Well, this is an important verse in Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada says the devotees of the Supreme Lord, or the persons who are in Krishna consciousness, are called santas. And they are always in love with the Lord, as it is described in Brahma Samhita, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena, Santak Sadaiva Hridayesu Vilokayanti. The santas, being always in a compact of love with the Supreme Personality Godhead, Govinda, the giver of all pleasures, or Mukunda, the giver of liberation, or Krishna, the all-attractive person, cannot accept anything without first offering it to the Supreme Person. Therefore, such devotees always perform yagyas in different modes of devotional service, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, etc. And these performances of yagyas keep them always aloof from all kinds of contamination of sinful association in the material world. Others who prepare food for self or sense gratification are not only thieves, but also the eaters of all kinds of sins. How can a person be happy if he is both a thief and sinful? It is not possible. Therefore, in order for people to become happy in all respects, they must be taught to perform the easy process of Sankirtan Yagya in full Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, there can be no peace or happiness in the world. Well, someone who knows this sees the value of offering everything first to Krishna. And someone who takes things lightly might be negligent about it. Well, the person who knows that Krishna is behind everything, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that everything should be offered to him, and then he'll offer back as his prasadam, that person has knowledge. And because of that knowledge, they can recognize if another person is sincere or not sincere. So a person that comes in front of them and says, oh, everything comes from monkeys and chimpanzees and it all happened by an accident and some kind of comet came close to the earth and sent some electromagnetic wave that went through the ozone layer at the North Pole and struck the primordial amoebic soup, or primordial soup of chemicals, and a one-celled living entity came out of it, and then one cell became 2, and 2 became 4, and 4 became 8, and that's the way life came about, by trial and error for a long period of time, by survival of the fittest, and eventually genetic mutation and so forth. Well, that sounds rational, but it's totally irrational. Nothing, matter does not organize itself by accident. Everything we do in our life, we see that matter is organized by intelligent people. And when people are not intelligent, maybe they're smoking marijuana, maybe they're taking LSD, maybe they're taking methamphetamines, they destroy things. They don't build them, they destroy them. But those people who are sober and conscious, they're able to build things. So a devotee becomes very forbearing because the devotee understands Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I'm his eternal servant, and service to the Lord is the effective way of relating to him. And it's actually the means and the end are combined. It's not the means justify, or the end justifies the means. The means and end are combined. If you do devotional service in this world, when you go back to Godhead, you'll continue doing devotional service. So this is, at the same time, the end and the means combined. In fact, if you're engaged in devotional service sincerely in this world, you're already liberated. And that's an important principle to understand. Aho bhata swapakoto gariyan. Anyone who's chanted Hare Krishna, who is chanting Hare Krishna, has already performed all different types of yagyas and sacrifices and visited all the holy places of pilgrimage and studied the scriptures and so forth, so that in this life they're able to take up the sincere chanting of Hare Krishna. So, the devotee can forbear and tolerate so many things. Haridas Thakur tolerated being beaten and disdained and even hated by Muslims and Hindus. But Lord Chaitanya would come and visit him every day and bring him prasadam from Jagannath. Jesus Christ was tortured, but he asked God to forgive his torturers. How is that possible? Well, because they have a real relationship with God, with Krishna. Therefore, they don't feel alone, they don't feel disaffected, they don't feel disconnected. As far as personal affairs of the devotee is not so much concerned about it. But in the case of someone insulting Krishna or someone insulting other devotees, the sincere devotee must act, must do something. Then the devotee takes strong action. Okay, so this was a personal affair for Maharaj Parikshit. Therefore, he could understand, it was not a normal thing that he did, putting the snake. Therefore, there was some mysterious element to it. And he just accepted it, full responsibility. He didn't try and get out of it, he didn't try and counter it. That's the hallmark of a devotee. The devotee will accept full responsibility and suffer the results all the time depending on Krishna. So now we're going to go back and discuss much more in detail the discussion between the bull and the cow and the bull and Maharaj Parikshit, because this is extremely profound. And if we can understand this, a lot of confusion about life is eliminated. So this is Canto 1, Chapter 17, verse number 14, where it says, "Whoever causes offenseless living beings to suffer must fear me anywhere and everywhere in the world. By curbing dishonest miscreants, one automatically benefits the offenseless." So this is Maharaj Parikshit speaking to the bull and trying to find out who has cut off your 3 legs. In the state of the kings who are obedient to the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, there is no one as unhappy as you. He's speaking to the bull. You are offenseless and thoroughly honest. Therefore, I wish all good to you. Please tell me of the perpetrator of these mutilations, which blackmail the reputation of the sons of Prithu. In other words, it's a black spot on the sons of Pandavas. So Prabhupada says, dishonest miscreants flourish because of cowardly and impotent executive heads of state. But when the executive heads are strong enough to curb all sorts of dishonest miscreants in any part of the state, certainly they cannot flourish. Certainly the miscreants cannot flourish. When the miscreants are punished in an exemplary manner, automatically all good fortune follows. As said before, it is the prime duty of the king or the executive head to give protection in all respects to the peaceful, offenseless citizens of the state. The devotees of the Lord are by nature peaceful and offenseless, and therefore it is the prime duty of the state to arrange to convert everyone to become a devotee of the Lord. Thus, automatically there will be peaceful, offenseless citizens. Then the only duty of the king will be to curb the dishonest miscreants that will bring about peace and harmony all over the human society. So you can understand from this that there's always going to be some miscreants. The king's duty is to help everyone become a devotee. There's always going to be some percentage of the population that refuse to become devotees and actually take up the life of miscreants. So the king, or the executive ruler of a country, has to be very, very strict and severe and rigorous to prosecute and punish the miscreants in an exemplary way. An upstart living being who commits offenses by torturing those who are offenseless shall be directly uprooted by me, even though he be a denizen of heaven with armor and decorations. Then he says, the supreme duty of the ruling king is to give all protection to law-abiding persons and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of the scriptures in ordinary times when there is no emergency. Oh, that's an interesting point, because let's say there's an extraordinary situation and an emergency. Does that mean that we can stray from the principles? Not the basic principles, no, but there are certain things that we can discuss. Like when Prabhupada was in Moscow for the first time, and they were in a hotel room with Shamsundar and some other devotees, Aravinda, and Prabhupada wanted some milk. So at that time, he had to go to these government state-run stores, and they didn't have milk in cartons. You had to bring something with you. And of course, they had just come from India, and they didn't have anything. So Prabhupada said, take my lota. And the devotees said, but Prabhupada, you use that in the bathroom. He said, I know. Just wash it and take it. So they were a little, a little taken aback. But it was an emergency, right? So they washed it, and they took it, and they brought the milk back, and they drank the milk. Okay, so in an emergency, sometimes certain principles, not the basic fundamental principles, certain principles can, or let's say there's an absolute emergency, there's absolutely nothing to eat, except maybe a chicken. Well, if it's a question of birth, life and death, then you might have to eat the chicken, right? Or otherwise you're going to die, But usually those situations are not present. There's always alternatives. But let's say you were in a dire situation that has no other choice between life and death, then you might have to do that. But that would just be a very great exception. And the exception doesn't change the rule, as long as you don't keep following the exception when everything comes back to normal. So Prabhupada says in the scriptures there is mention of apad dharma, or occupational duty at times of extraordinary happenings. It is said that sometimes the great sage Vishwamitra had to live on the flesh of dogs in some extraordinary dangerous position. In case of emergency, one may be allowed to live on the flesh of animals of all descriptions, but that does not mean that there should be regular slaughterhouses to feed the animal eaters, and that this system should be encouraged by the state. You see? It's very interesting. No one should try to live on flesh in ordinary times simply for the sake of the palate. If anyone does so, the king or the executive head should punish him for gross enjoyment. There are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one who follows them is called swadharmasta, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. In the Bhagavad Gita 18:48, it is advised that one should not give up his occupational prescribed duties, even if they are not always flawless. Such swadharma might be violated in cases of emergency if one is forced by circumstances, but they cannot be violated in ordinary times. The state executive head is to see that such swadharma is not changed by the follower, whatever it may be, and he should give all protection to the follower of swadharma. The violator is subject to punishment in terms of the Shastra. And the duty of the king is to see that everyone strictly follows his occupational duty as prescribed in the scriptures. So there are real situations, like, for example, some devotees during the Soviet Union time were put in jail. Some of them absolutely refused to eat meat. And the jailers wouldn't give anything to them to eat except maybe bread. So, for different reasons, some devotees died in jail. Now, if you just eat white bread every day and water, you can live for some time. You're not going to die right away. But if that's all you eat for a long, long period of time, you could eventually, your health can eventually deteriorate seriously, especially if it's just white bread. So some devotees died. Now, why did they die? Was it because of malnutrition? Was it because of the cold and damp environment of the prison? We don't know for sure. But if it was a question of life and death, then according to what Prabhupada is explaining here, they could eat meat temporarily, if that's all that's available, in order to stay alive. But if someone is a fanatic and they don't read carefully Prabhupada's instruction, or if they're in the association of other fanatics who have a very myopic vision of things, then they could say, well, better to die than to eat meat. And they die. So you have to be careful when you're giving advice to someone and you're not an expert in Krishna consciousness. You could give them advice in such a way that it causes them to die. I know several people that did that. And some devotees died in different, not just in Soviet jail, but in the United States also, because they gave them wrong advice. I know one devotee gave the wrong advice to someone, and he enlisted in the army, and he died. And this person got shocked by it and basically affected their life from that point on for having given the wrong advice to a person. So we have to be very, very careful when we give advice to someone who a priori accepts Krishna consciousness completely and accepts the authority of the person who's teaching them. So we have to, before we teach and give all kinds of advice, we have to be expert in understanding what Prabhupada has given us as instructions for Krishna consciousness. So, Dharma now replies to Maharaj Parikshit, "These words just spoken by you befit a person of the Pandava dynasty. Captivated by the devotional qualities of the Pandavas, even Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, performed duties as a messenger." Now you see, this is the way to speak. Right? Now, we're going to see Dharma doesn't exactly agree with everything Maharaj Parikshit said. But he begins his response by glorifying him. And rightly so. He's part of a glorious dynasty and glorious forefathers. And he's a good representative of them. He's brave, he's courageous, he's willing to fight for the principles of religion, he's willing to protect the defenseless. These are all good things. And he says that even Lord Krishna became the servant of your forefathers. That's how great your family is. Purport: the assurances and challenges made by Maharaj Parikshit are never exaggerations of his real power. The Maharaj said that even the denizens of heaven could not escape his stringent government if they were violators of religious principles. Even the demigods could not escape him if they violated the religious principles. He was not falsely proud, for a devotee of the Lord is equally as powerful as the Lord, or sometimes more powerful by his grace, or the Lord's grace. And any promise made by a devotee, though it may be ordinarily very difficult to fulfill, is properly executed by the grace of the Lord. The Pandavas, by their unalloyed devotional service and full surrender unto the Lord, made it possible for the Lord to become a chariot driver, or sometimes their letter messenger. Such duties executed by the Lord for his devotee are always very pleasing to the Lord, because the Lord wants to render service to his unalloyed devotee whose life has no other engagement than to serve the Lord with full love and devotion. So the Lord becomes his devotee's devotee out of love. And there's famous history of Sanatana and Rupa Goswami. They were living in Vrindavan, but there was no Vrindavan at that time. It was just fields. And eventually, Sanatana Goswami built the first temple, Radha Madan Mohan temple. But there were no temples, there was nothing. And it was very austere. And they were sleeping under a different tree every night, the Goswamis. So one day, Rupa Goswami was just musing how he would love to have some nice things to cook a feast for his brother Sanatan. But they didn't have anything. You know, there was no Safeway, there was no Fred Meyer, there was no, cash and carry, there was no Costco, there was nothing, right? If you didn't grow anything, you didn't eat. So he was just thinking like that. Out of nowhere, a beautiful young girl came, and she was carrying a whole bunch of stuff, and she said, "This is for you, O sage." He said, "Well, who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm just a cowherd girl, but I want you to have this." So he was so excited to get he had just thought about it, and then all of a sudden, here it is. He was so excited because now he could actually cook a nice feast for his brother. He didn't think too much about it. He was very attracted by this lovely young girl, but he thanked her very much, and then she said, "I have to go." He said, "Why don't you stay out? You can." No, she said, "I have to go." She leaves. So he begins to cook, and then his brother comes, and he says, "Rupa, where did you get all these things from?" He said, "Oh, some very pretty young girl came and brought it to me." He says, "Pretty young girl? So what is this? What happened here?" He said, "Well, today I was thinking how wonderful it would be if I could make a nice feast for you. And I don't know, out of nowhere, this girl came and said, 'This is very unfortunate.' I said, 'Why? What's unfortunate about it? I want to make a nice feast for you.' He said, 'No. You have taken personal service from Srimati Radharani.'" And like Rupa Goswami was somewhat shocked. He said, "We never ask the Lord for anything, but the Lord is so anxious to serve us that if we even give a hint that we want some service from him, immediately he comes or sends Radharani or somehow or other." He said, "We should never even give a hint of wanting anything from the Lord. Why should we bother the Lord with our personal affairs?" These are pure devotees, I say. So Rupa Goswami felt very bad, but he offered the feast to his brother. I think he himself fasted that day for taking service from Radharani. So there's this competition. A devotee, pure devotee, doesn't want to ask anything from the Lord, just wants to give to the Lord. But if there's anything the Lord can do for the devotee, hook or crook, he'll do it. So Sanatan was very strict. He would never ask for anything from the Lord. In fact, it became so strict that one day his personal deity, Madan Mohan, complained to him. He said, "Sanatan, I don't have a temple. You hang me from a branch of a tree, and then you offer arti, and the prasadam you offer is a dry roti without any salt." He said, "At least put some salt in it." He said, "My Lord, I can only give you what you give me. If you don't give me salt, I can't put any salt." See, they had a very personal relationship. You know, he could scold the Lord. He considered the Lord like his son. Just see. I mean, that's Vrindavan worship. It's very, very simple. You know, it's not like Dwarka where everything is, or Ranga Kshetra where everything is opulent. This is, you know, very intimate and very, very simple. So, genuine devotees do not seek to gain anything from service. They only render service to please the Lord. If anything is left over, they accept as prasadam. If nothing is left over, they don't complain. They're very happy that the Lord is satisfied. Okay. it says here, there are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one who follows them is called swadharmasta, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. In Bhagavad Gita 1848, it is advised that one should not give up his occupational prescribed duties, even if they are not always flawless. Such swadharma might be violated in cases of emergency if one is forced by circumstances, but they cannot be violated in ordinary times. Okay, so then the next verse, Personality of Dharma says that, of course, these words spoken by you befit a person of the Pandava dynasty and so forth. Then after that, O greatest among human beings, it is very difficult to ascertain the particular miscreant who has caused our sufferings, because we are bewildered by all the different opinions of theoretical philosophers. Now this is a very profound statement by the bull. Maharaj Pariksit asked him a direct question, who did this to you? Well, you would say, the personality of Kali did it. He broke my 3 legs. But no, the bull is saying, it's very difficult to ascertain the real particular miscreant. And why? Because we are bewildered by all the different opinions of theoretical philosophers. Just like today, people are bewildered. Is the economic downturn due to Obama? Or is it due to Bush? Or is it due to the Democrats? Or is it due to the Republicans? Or is it due to Fidel Castro? Or is it due to, Hurricane Katrina? Or is it due to Al-Qaeda? Everyone has their own opinion why there's an economic downturn. Why? And how about, why was that girl molested in Delhi? Is it because, why? There are not enough strict laws in India? Does it have to do with alcoholism in India? Does it have to do with degradation of principles of religion? Does it have to do with atheism? Is it because there's a secular government in India? Is it because, low-class Hindus are not educated properly in the public school? You could go through 1,000 reasons, and people will give 1,000 reasons that why they think these things are happening. Or in America, why are there massacres taking place? Well, people say there's too many guns. But yet, statistically, in those places where gun laws are much more liberal, there's a lot less crime. Everywhere where there's a massacre, it's usually a state where or city where there are very strict gun rules, so that the common people don't have guns because it's getting too strict to get them. But the criminals, they don't follow any rules, so they get guns. So all you're doing is restricting the honest people from protecting themselves. But anyway, you can argue it both ways. There's many ways, there's many opinions, and you just listen to what they say on the television and the radio. Everyone's coming up with an opinion why this is happening. Of course, they don't mention, some people mention pornography, lack of education, breakdown of the family, missing father, and 40–50% of the homes in the United States, divorce rates, high divorce rates, atheism. You can go through 1,000 different reasons, but what is the exact reason in reality? Well, Bhagavatam would say it's forgetfulness of Krishna. That's why we came to the material world in the first place. But not everyone will accept that. So the Buddha said, I can't really say who's a miscreant because there's so many opinions by so many philosophers that we're all bewildered. Just like we're bewildered today. Why did that massacre happen? Why is there economic downturn? Why this? Why that? So there are many theoretical philosophers in the world who put forward their own theories of cause and effect, especially about the cause of suffering and its effect on different living beings. See, that's the thing. Why did this massacre happen? Why does there have to be so much suffering? Why is there so much evil in this society when we have so much to be happy about? Evil is the thing that confuses people. They can't understand. If there's a God, then why is there evil? Why can't God just eliminate evil, make everyone good? And because there's no clear-cut answer given in other religions, there are some answers, definitely. And some of the answers come somewhat close to the reality, but oftentimes it digresses, and then people who have had formal educational training, they're not very impressed by those explanations. Kanada, the author of Vaisheshika philosophy, Gautama, the author of logic, Patanjali, the author of mystic yoga, Kapila, the author of Sankhya philosophy, Jaimini, the author of Karma Mimamsa, and Vyasa, the author of Vedanta Darshan. These are the 6 great philosophical schools, and each one gives some little difference of explanation why there is suffering. Although the bull, or the personality of religion, and the cow, the personality of the earth, knew perfectly well that the personality of Kali was the direct cause of their suffering, still, as devotees of the Lord, they knew well also that without the sanction of the Lord, no one could inflict trouble upon them. According to the Padma Purana, our present trouble is due to the fructifying of seedling sins, but even those seedling sins also gradually fade away by execution of pure devotional service. Thus, even if the devotees see the mischief mongers, they do not accuse them for the sufferings inflicted. They take it for granted that the mischief monger is made to act by some indirect cause, and therefore they tolerate the sufferings, thinking them to be God-given in small doses, for otherwise the sufferings should have been greater. Maharaj Parikshit wanted to get a statement of accusation against the direct mischief monger, but they declined to give it on the above-mentioned grounds. Speculative philosophers, however, do not recognize the sanction of the Lord. They try to find out the cause of sufferings in their own way, as will be described in the following verses. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, such speculators are themselves bewildered, and thus they cannot know that the ultimate cause of all causes is the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. Now, this is extremely profound. It requires a little more explanation. And this is not the only place where Prabhupada writes this. So if we go to 12th chapter, 12th and 13th verse, Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada makes the same statement, and it's also in other parts of the Bhagavatam. Adveshta sarva bhutana maitra karana evacha nirmamo nirhankara samuduka sukham dhiram santusto satata yogi yatatma drita nishchaya mayarpita mano buddhir murmam bhakta samepriya. One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, he says, coming again to the point of pure devotional service, the Lord is describing the transcendental qualifications of a pure devotee in these 2 verses. A pure devotee is never disturbed in any circumstances, nor is he envious of anyone. Nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. He thinks, this person is acting as my enemy due to my own past misdeeds. So it is better to suffer than to protest. Now, have you ever heard such a thing? It's better to suffer. Who can do that? It's better to suffer than... People would say, this is nonsense. This is slavery. This is the philosophy of a battered victim of abuse. How can you say it's better to suffer than to protest? Well, let's read on and see what Prabhupada says. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.8, why don't you open that up, Prabhu? And we'll read that also. It is stated, Tate nukampam susamiksamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. Whenever a devotee is in distress or has fallen into difficulty, he thinks that it is the Lord's mercy upon him. He thinks, thanks to my past misdeeds, I should suffer far, far greater than I am suffering now. So it is by the mercy of the Supreme Lord that I am not getting all the punishment I am due. I am just getting a little by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is always calm, quiet, and patient. Notice this is exactly what we read here in the purport to Bhagavatam 1, 18, 17, where Prabhupada says that thus, even if the devotees see the mischief mongers, they do not accuse them for the sufferings inflicted. They take it for granted that the mischief monger is made to act by some indirect cause, and therefore they tolerate the sufferings, thinking them to be God-given in small doses, for otherwise the sufferings should have been greater. You see how perfect Prabhupada is. He never contradicts himself, because all he's doing is repeating Shastra, so he cannot contradict. When you make things up, later on you'll contradict yourself, because you can't remember all the nonsense you said previously. But if we just stick to Shastra, then it's very difficult to contradict yourself, because you're simply going to repeat Shastra in different contexts. Okay. So, a devotee is always kind to everyone, even to his enemy. Nirmama means that a devotee does not attach much importance to the pains and trouble pertaining to the body, because he knows perfectly well that he is not the material body. He does not identify with the body. Therefore, he is freed from the conception of false ego and is equipoised in happiness and distress. He is tolerant, and he is satisfied with whatever comes by the grace of the Supreme Lord. He does not endeavor much to achieve something with great difficulty. Therefore, he is always joyful. He is completely a perfect mystic because he is fixed in the instructions received from the spiritual master, and because his senses are controlled, he is determined. He is not swayed by false arguments, because no one can lead him from the fixed determination of devotional service. He is fully conscious that Krishna is the eternal Lord, so no one can disturb him. All these qualifications enable him to fix his mind and intelligence entirely on the Supreme Lord. Such a standard of devotional service is undoubtedly very rare, but a devotee becomes situated in that stage by following the regulative principles of devotional service. Furthermore, the Lord says that such a devotee is very dear to him, for the Lord is always pleased with all his activities in full Krishna consciousness. So this is an important thing to learn. If we simply repeat scriptural knowledge, we will not contradict ourselves. Now, you see in every election, presidential election, right, they very, very carefully scrutinize the different speeches by the candidates, and they say, well, in the 2008 election cycle, Barack Obama said that he would not raise taxes. But now it's 2012, and he's saying he's going to raise taxes, right? Or was it the older Bush, when he was running against Dukakis, he says, read my lips, no new taxes. Right? He did that in his speech. Right? Just like that. He didn't say it out loud. Read my lips, no new taxes. What does he do in his first term? 1 or 2 years into the first term, he raises the taxes. That's why he lost the election. He was a one-term president. He came in, he made that statement, no new taxes, right? Read my lips. And then he raised the taxes, right? So they voted him out, even though he would have been voted in for the second time, but he violated his own words, right? So, if we simply repeat the scriptural knowledge, we will never contradict ourselves. If we make something up, then it's very difficult to remember everything we've said in the past, especially if it was made up, right? So as we go on making things up, we're going to end up contradicting ourselves, and people see that. Therefore, to not be a phony, one must be a genuine devotee and sticking to Shastric statements, backing up everything we say with Shastric statements. Now, we all make mistakes. That's good. We can be corrected based on Shastra, right? And then we're safe. Yeah, go ahead. Let's read that verse. Tatenu kampam susamiksamano.
My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim.
Sadaya Bhak. Mukti Pade Sabaya Bhak. Mukti is standing on his footsteps. Right? It's his right to have mukti, because it's better to suffer than to protest. One accepts whatever happens as the mercy of the Lord. He doesn't blame the perpetrators of the evil. Now, that would be really hard today, right? Because whenever there's a law and police catch a perpetrator, they call him a perp, right? So they want that perp to be taken before the judge and want the judge to sentence the perp to, some kind of appropriate punishment. So this attitude of a pure devotee is not necessarily the attitude that a king should take, whose duty is to protect the citizens, you see. Personally, one can take that attitude, but not for society. Otherwise, there will be, the dacoits will run wild, right? So we have to understand these things. When we're talking about pure devotee, it's a personal thing. And we can have a much higher standard for ourselves, but we shouldn't impose that on everyone else. When I say higher standard of compassion, of mercy, and so forth. Like, for example, let's say there's a temple president, right? And he has an ashram and a temple he's taking care of. Now, let's say somebody comes off the street and says, "Can I stay here tonight?" And he says, sure. You want some prasadam? Here's a fresh stoti, and you can sleep with the brahmacharis. Now, see, that's a very irresponsible thing to do. If he's going to let anyone come in without checking their background, right, then why doesn't he sleep with them the first night? Why does he bring that person, let him sleep next to him? You say, no, he's going to go to a safe place, lock the door, and then he lets this unknown person into the brahmacharya ashram. He didn't look into his background. He doesn't know what his background is. Like, for example, one time a person came and said, "Oh, Haribol, Prabhu, I'm initiated by so-and-so, and I've been in the movement 18 years. Can I stay in the temple tonight?" I said, "Well, that depends. Depends on what?" I said, "Well, it depends what you've been doing for the last 18 years. He said, "Well, what do you mean? I'm initiated." I said, "I know you're initiated. Well, give me a list of the temples that you've been serving in the last 18 years. So I gave him a pencil and paper, and so he puts, 1979 to 1983 Utah temple. And then he puts 1996 to 2001 Los Angeles temple. And then he puts, and that's it. So I said, "This is wonderful." I said, "But there seems to be 2 gaps. What did you do between 1983 and 2001 or 1997? And what did you do between 2001 and today?" He said, "Well, I was living at home." I said, "You were living at home? What did you do at home?" "Oh, so I got a job, I got married, I had a child." I said, "Okay." I said, "I want you to answer the following questions, yes or no, and tell me the truth. Have you ever done time in prison?" He said, "Well, what does that have to do with anything?" I said, "It has nothing to do with you, because if you've done it, you've done it. And if you haven't done it, you haven't done it. But it has a lot to do with me, with how I can make this decision. Can you tell me if you've been in prison? He said, no, I was never in prison. I said, okay, can you give me the phone number of your wife? He said, what does that have to do? Well, I said, how can I verify if you're telling the truth or not? He said, well, I'm divorced. I said, okay, can you give me the phone? Okay, well, you stayed in Utah. I'll call the temple there. Why you have to call the temple? Well, I want to find out why you left. So what does that have to do with anything? I have the freedom to leave. I said, okay, now you're throwing up a bunch of red flags in front of me. I said, who's your guru? He said, it was so-and-so. I said, well, he's the guru in Utah. Can I call him up? He said, well, why do you want to call him up? I said, okay, this interview is over. You come back, you call me in a week. I'm going to do my research. So I did the research. He's a criminal. I mean, it's hard to say what he did, but let's say he did something really awful to one of his own family members, one of his own children. And he did time for it. Right? Now, if he had told me the truth, I still would not have let him stay in the temple for such an egregious thing, you know, even though he did time. But the fact that he was trying to cover it up on top of everything, and I had to go to the trouble to find out, there's no way I would let this person. Now, he went to another temple and they let him in. You know what happened? After some time in the temple, he attacked another devotee and almost killed him. Put him in the hospital. He was actually a dangerous criminal. There was a part of him that was dark side. So this idea of being, you know, all merciful, all compassionate, yeah, definitely. We want to be all merciful, all compassionate, but individually we can do it, but not as a leader of a temple, or not when other people are depending on you to make the right decisions, to protect children, protect women, protect men, protect the deities, protect the property of the deities. You can't be like that. You have to be on the level of a Madhyam Adhikari. Madhyam Adhikari sees four categories of people. They are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who we worship, other devotees who we honor, innocent people who we help as much as we can, and demons who we very tactfully avoid. And if they're envious demons, then we have to banish them. You know, keep them away. Now, if you're a pure devotee and you don't have the responsibility of people depending on you, then, you know, you want to embrace the envious guy, you want to, whatever you want to do, you can do on your own. And no one will say anything, because that's the nature of a genuine devotee. They're genuinely compassionate, even to the worst person. They don't become the enemy of their enemy. Right? But in a position of responsibility where people are depending on you to make the right decision, you cannot be like that, unless you want to make a mess of everything. So he is completely perfect mystic because he is fixed in the instructions received from the spiritual master, and because his senses are controlled, he is determined. He is not swayed by false arguments, because no one can lead him from the fixed determination of devotional service. He is fully conscious that Krishna is the eternal Lord, so no one can disturb him. That's the point. He's fixed in his understanding that Krishna is the eternal Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So no one can disturb him. All these qualifications enable him to fix his mind and intelligence entirely on the Supreme Lord. Such a standard of devotional service is undoubtedly very rare, but a devotee becomes situated in that stage by following the regulative principles of devotional service. Furthermore, the Lord says that such a devotee is very dear to him, for the Lord is always pleased with all his activities in full Krishna consciousness. Now, someone becomes like this by following the regulative principles of devotional service. This is explained in depth in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verses 64 and 65. Raga dvesa vimuktayistu vishayan indriyascharan atmavaistver videyatma prasadam adigachati. Prasade sarvadukhanam hanyar asyo bachayate prasana chetaso hyaso buddhi prayavasistate. So these two verses say, but a person free from attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So what are these regulative principles of freedom? Freedom from what? Attachment and aversion, raga and dvesa, or ichya and dvesa, desire and hate. What are these principles? Well, they are no meat eating, fish or eggs or chicken, no intoxication, including coffee and tea, no illicit sex outside of marriage or inside of marriage, no meat eating, no intoxication, and no gambling or philosophical speculation. Now, philosophical speculation means you don't know the answer to a question, but you make it up. You use phrases like, I think, what if, imagine that, let us suppose, maybe. You know, whenever a phrase begins with those words, you know that you're on dangerous ground, that this person doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. They're just making it up. So that's philosophical speculation. They don't know the answer, they just make something up that sounds good. And then when they are in trouble, they use words that you don't understand. So then you say, wow, he must really know what he's talking about, because I didn't understand one word of it. He used all this science, like Deepak Chopra when he speaks, you know, but nobody knows what he's talking about. But they all go away, oh, that was the most thrilling lecture I've ever heard in my life. He's such a brilliant man. They don't know what he talked about. He used all these words, you know, he painted a picture of words. And this world is called the world of words. People build domino buildings with words. There's no substance to it, but it looks like a tremendous edifice. So, you know, you can call a blind boy Padma Lochan. Now, does that make sense? He's blind, and you're saying he has eyes like a lotus. His name is Padma Lochan. Come here. You know. Now, how can you call a blind boy Padma Lochan, right? That's what poetry is. You know, you hear Coleridge and Wordsworth and Emerson and this one and that one. You know, they're building up some palace in the sky with words, and people are so thrilled by it. But it has no substance to it. Absolutely no substance. Even Shakespeare, who's a fantastic poet, and people say, "Oh, it's right on. This is so true." But next to Vyasadeva, Shakespeare is not even the size of a mosquito. Because not only is the philosophy of Vyasadeva and poetry far outstrips Shakespeare, but the content, the understanding, the truthful content is unbelievable. Because it can elevate a person from the cycle of birth and death to eternal salvation. So one is entertainment, the other is liberating a person. Therefore it says, raga dvesa mimuktaisthu vishayan indriyaischaran atma vaistir videyatma prasadam adigachati. This videya atma, one who follows the regulative principles of freedom, as you know, and the four positive things are always chanting Hare Krishna in the names of God, regularly reading every day Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and discussing it amongst devotees, offering your food before you eat to Krishna, not to anybody. Like there was this one man making all his offerings to a picture of Hitler. He was an industrialist in India, and he was making a fortune off of selling raw materials to Nazi Germany. So instead of worshipping Ganapati or anybody, or Durga, he was worshipping Hitler, because he was getting his money from Hitler and the Nazis. See? So that doesn't mean that the offerings become prasadam, because he's offering to that guy with a little mustache in the middle of his lip. No. It becomes prasadam if you offer it to Krishna and he accepts. In other words, Krishna is not obliged to accept. He didn't accept the offerings of Duryodhana. He refused. Even though Duryodhana made very, very delicious food, right? Fit for a king. He refused. He went to eat whatever Vidura could give him, a banana peel or little pieces of rice, or whatever he gave him. He said, this is delicious. It's the best prasad I ever had. You see, so Krishna is not obliged to accept whatever we offer him. He will only accept it if it's accompanied by Tulsi Devi and if it's accompanied by love and devotion. So, it is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process, but unless the senses are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of a fall. Although the person in full Krishna consciousness may apparently be on the sensual plane, because of his being Krishna conscious, he has no attachment to sensual activities. Yeah, we have senses, we have a body, and we are acting on the sensual plane, but we're not attracted to sense gratification. In other words, look, but don't touch. And when you look, what you see is a bag of stool, urine, pus, mucus, bile, tendons, ligaments, bones, intestines, ribs, heart, gallbladder, pancreas, all nasty stuff. Other people look at, oh, look at that, oh my God, you know. They're not seeing the reality. They're seeing the envelope, but they don't see what's in the envelope. Just like you get an envelope and you open up and you see this urine and stool in it. The envelope looked good, but when you open it up, it's full of urine and stool. So then you say, oh, what a nasty thing. But if you look at the envelope, it looks nice, and it had a nice Christmas packaging around it. So beauty is only skin deep. When you look at the body, it's actually a nasty thing. It's not a pretty thing. And we see that when we go to the toilet. That's the reality. Everything else is just a false impression that we have. So all these impressions bewilder us because we don't see deeply into what is the real nature of a thing. Well, the real nature is the soul that's in the body. But the soul is covered by this all these nasty substances. We interpret the nasty substances as the real thing and ignore the soul. So correcting our vision happens by following these regulative principles of freedom. The Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. Both of these things are encumbering, attachment and detachment. So a devotee is neither attached nor is he detached. A devotee is dedicated to Krishna. That's the difference. Materialists are either attached or detached. Just like Rajneesh, he was very attached. He had 99 limousines. He had 400-acre farm or 1,000-acre farm in Oregon. He had thousands and thousands of disciples. He had so much money. He had bank accounts in Switzerland, the Caymans, and everywhere you can imagine, right? Then he lost it all, right? So then he said, my name now is Osho. He became a Buddhist. I have nothing. I'm a bhikshu. So both positions were false, attachment and detachment. They were both false. They were based on his own false ego. It had nothing to do with Krishna. Right? So when you can't own everything, then you say, I want nothing. You say, both are, one is the flip side of the other. It's both based on attachment of being great, the greatest. I'm the greatest Vishayi or I'm the greatest yogi. One time a devotee said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen devotee. Prabhupada said, you are not the most fallen anything. By saying I'm the most fallen devotee, one is characterizing themselves as very special, because Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Doya Moya Kore, Yes, samsara dukkha. In other words, my dear Lord, because I'm the most fallen devotee, I deserve to get your mercy first. It's a song. It's a bhajan, right? So if he's the most fallen devotee, that means he's very special. And then the Lord must give him his mercy first. So Prabhupada told him, you're not the most anything. You see how sharp Prabhupada is. He stopped him in his tracks before he went off into this self-praise by thinking he's the most something. So, therefore, the devotee is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable. And if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. Therefore, to act or not to act is within his control because he acts only under the direction of Krishna. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. This is extremely profound. This explains the real, let's say, the real platform of Krishna consciousness. It's not based on phony attachment and detachment. It's based on what pleases Krishna as the criterion. So one will do something that they ordinarily wouldn't do, and one will not do something that they would ordinarily do on the basis of pleasing Krishna, not on the basis of what feels good for me. This philosophy of making decisions on the basis of feel-goodness is the worst criterion in the world. What feels good to another person might not feel good to you. What are you going to do then? Just like Hitler, to him it felt good to kill different groups of people in his society. Gypsies and Jews and communists and people that didn't agree with him, even though they were German, right? He still killed them. So this feel-goodness philosophy is the worst criterion. You can commit all kinds of atrocious atrocities in the name of, I only do things to make me feel good. That's not a criterion, because in summer, cold water feels good. And in winter, cold water feels bad, you see. So it's very relative to the body. It's not relative to reality. Reality is water cools. So whether you pour boiling water on the fire still goes out because it's cooler than the fire. You see. So water has the quality of cooling, even if it's boiling. Of course, it would burn your skin, right? But if you pour it on fire, it'll put the fire out. It'll cool it. And salt is salty, and sugar is sweet. Right? So what is that quality of the human being that you cannot separate it? Just like you cannot separate sweetness from sugar, saltiness from salt, heat from fire, coolness from water. Service. No one can stop serving something or someone. So therefore, we can decide in our life whether we want to serve Krishna or we want to serve Maya. That's the limit of our free will. We think, pakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasa hankara vimudatma kartahamiti manyate. People think, I have free will. Nobody tells me what to do. That's crazy. People are telling us what to do all the time, and we're following. If you don't want anyone to tell you what to do, then, go live as a hermit in Mount Rainier or somewhere. But still, the bear will tell you, get out of my territory. The bear will come and say, this is my territory. You get out, I'll kill you. And you'll get out. So this feel-goodness is a terrible, terrible criterion. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So this is the platform of Krishna consciousness. And therefore, the bull is not giving his direct answer. Although they knew there was the personality Kali that broke the bull's legs and it was putting the cow or Mother Earth into great anxiety. Maharaj Parikshit, he wanted to get a statement of accusation against the direct mischief monger, just like the prosecutor wants to get proof that the defendant is guilty. Right? So he needs statements, he needs eyewitnesses, and so forth. But they declined to give it on the above-mentioned grounds. Speculative philosophers, however, do not recognize the sanction of the Lord. Now, this is the main point. There are 5 factors to every action. And most people take into account 3 or 4 of those factors, but not the most important one. So those factors are the place of action, meaning the body, the senses, the action itself, the different endeavors, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is 18th chapter, 14th verse. Adhistanam tata karta karanam na pritak vidam vividascha pritak chista daivam chaivatra panchama. The place of action, meaning the body, the performer, or the doer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. The word adhistanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as karta, the doer. That the soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti, Esahi drasta strasta, Prasna Upanishad 4.9. It is also confirmed in Vedanta Sutra by the verses Gno ta eva and Karta Shastrar tavatvat. The instruments of action are the senses, and by the senses the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the Supreme Soul, or Supersoul, who is seated within the heart as a friend. The Supreme Lord is a super cause. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Supersoul, situated within the heart, is naturally not bound by any activity. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the Supreme Will, the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, this is very, very prone to be misinterpreted. In fact, many of the problems in our movement has come from people who have thought they understood this explanation, but misapplied it. And I'm going to give an example. There was one person in this movement who thought that the end justifies the means when the end is to please Krishna. So, using that as a criterion, because the goal of life, right, is to please Krishna, right? That's the whole definition of pure devotional service. It should be rendered favorably to please Krishna. Now, the key word is understanding the word favorable, right? So anyway, he engaged in all kinds of illegal activities, thinking that, well, since we're offering everything to Krishna, Krishna will protect us and purify it. The answer to that is no. Krishna does not protect and purify or indemnify a criminal activity. He indemnifies activity according to the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, not activity that violates those rules. Just like once, when I was in France, this one person came from the United States, and everyone was so excited because he was touted to be a very rich devotee, and he was coming to make a big donation to our temple. And they appointed me to be his chauffeur, you know, pick him up at the airport, take him around, and so forth. And so I got to associate with him. And when I was driving him around, he wanted to see different buildings. So, you know, he wanted to buy a building for a new temple. So we were going around, and he was looking at different places, and he kept saying, well, this is not what we want. And I was thinking, how does he know? He didn't even ask us what we want. So, you know, he was just looking around for buildings that were fancy to him, not to what was actually needed for the devotees. So then, after being with him 3 or 4 days, you know, I got a very uncomfortable feeling about him. And at one point, he started talking about something over and over again about, you know, in America, the devotees are making so much money. So, and I would hear him, and I would think, well, that's good, you know, as long as they use it for Krishna. And he said, and all the money they're making is for Prabhupada's books, and for Jagannath Rath Yatra, and for Krishna Janmashtami, and for Sankirtan, and for the temples, and buying farms, and protecting cows. And, you know, he would always go through a list like this. All good things, you know. And then, you know, after a couple of days, he started saying, and you know, you can make a lot of money too. I said, well, I mean, how? He said, well, you just have to carry something. I said, carry something? From where to where? I said, well, from India to here. Oh, I said, good. Well, how about the airline ticket? Said, oh, no, that's paid for. Oh, okay. By the way, you know, what is it that I have to carry? He said, oh, just some liquid. Liquid? Interesting. I said, what kind of liquid? He said, oh, it's just a plant liquid. I said, oh, what plant? And then he gave a name, you know, cannabis sativa, you know. And I said, that's Latin. I said, when I was taking Latin, cannabis sativa means it's marijuana. He said, yeah, but it's not the plant, it's the liquid. I said, oh, okay. Does that make it any better? You know, I said, it's still illegal here in France, and I'm sure it's illegal in the United States. Prabhu, it's for Prabhupada, for Prabhupada's books, for Jagannath and his Rath Yatra, it's for Janmashtami, it's for the temple, it's for the farm, it's for the cows, it's for the BBT. I said, I know, it's for all those things, but also when I got initiated, Srila Prabhupada made me promise no gambling, no meat eating, no intoxication, and no illicit activities. I said, so how could I carry cannabis, sativa or whatever it is, from India to France without breaking the 4 regulative principles? I said, forget about the law. Let's talk about the 4 regulative principles that I promised Prabhupada I wouldn't break. He said, well, you're not smoking it. We don't smoke it. I said, I know, but we're going to probably sell it to people that smoke it. You know, instead of giving them the holy name, we're giving them cannabis. I said, how does that make sense? You know, so to make a long story short, he was seriously violating regulative principles. He wasn't interested really in helping the temple. He was just enlisting idiot devotees to engage as mules carrying illicit drugs from one country to another. Make a long story short, 2 years later he ended up in jail, and his brother was murdered by the mafia, and it brought a lot of discredit to our movement. So it's a completely losing proposition. Because when we get initiated, we promise Prabhupada we will not do certain things and we will do other things. So that is our promise to the Guru. We can, if we break that promise, we are no longer a person. We've become a non-person because we have no values. Those are the values that make us devotees. And by breaking those values, we're no longer a devotee. You know, we're some kind of a devotee, but not a sincere devotee. You know. So Prabhupada says that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that the spiritual master appreciates devotees that offer him money. He'll accept it and use it in Krishna's service. But the spiritual master is indebted to that devotee who strictly follows the regulative principles. So there's a difference between appreciating something and feeling indebted to someone. Indebted means you cannot really repay them. You simply can thank them and encourage them to continue. Just like Krishna is indebted to the gopis by their service. And he says to them, I can't really repay you. You just have to be satisfied with your service to me. See? Okay, so this principle of not being protected by the Lord and not being ultimately responsible for one's actions. Now, when we act for sense gratification, we're responsible for everything we do, according to the laws of nature. But when we act for Krishna's service by following the rules under the order of the spiritual master, at that point we're not responsible. That doesn't mean we act irresponsibly. That means that we are indemnified. Just like they have a law, they have different laws, like in corporate law. The directors of a corporation are indemnified by corporate law of liabilities of the corporation when it's in the statutes. When they don't put it in the statutes, they're not indemnified. But when they put it in the statutes, that this is the statutes and the bylaws of the corporation, then they're not held responsible unless there is criminal activity. Then they're held responsible. But if there's just stupidity, bad decisions not based on criminal activity, then they're not held responsible for the debts of the corporation. They're shielded. There's an arm's length distance. So in the same way, when we act only to please Krishna under the order of the spiritual master, not by violating it, not by acting whimsically, then we are not responsible. Therefore, Krishna says, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksisyami masucha. I will protect you for any sins incurred in the process or in the execution of devotional service if you're completely surrendered to me. Surrendered to me meaning we follow his instructions integrally. We don't follow 3 rules and ignore 1. We follow all 4. We follow all the rules. Okay, so now we're going to continue in this discussion between Bhumi Devi, personality of the earth in the form of the cow, and the personality of Dharma, the bull, and Maharaj Parikshit. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, or speech is caused, by these 5 factors. Okay, so there are 5 factors for every action. Most people only take into account 3, 4, never the 5th. Therefore, they make major mistakes in their lives. But devotees take all 5 factors into account before they act. Some of the philosophers who deny all sorts of duality declare that one's own self is responsible for his personal happiness and distress. Others say that superhuman powers are responsible, while yet others say that activity is responsible, and the gross materialists maintain that nature is the ultimate cause. Now here we have a whole series of different attributions of cause for people's sufferings. Again, we enter into this realm of confusion, right? For different folks, there are different sloks, as they say. So, in the explanation to this verse, Prabhupada explains, as referred to above, philosophers like Jaimini and his followers established that fruitive activity is the root cause of all distress and happiness, and that even if there is a superior authority, some superhuman powerful god or gods, he or they are also under the influence of fruitive activity because they reward result according to one's action. So this is called the Karma Mimamsa philosophy, which claims that yes, there is a God, but even God is subject to the laws of karma, which are supreme. So this is an atheistic philosophy. It's false. It's not true. But it sounds really good. It feels good. But it's false. Just like when you have a boil, let's say you have a boil in your hand, it really is hot and burning and hurting. You go, you blow on it a little bit, and it feels good. Right, but it didn't heal the boil. Right, you have to cause pain to get rid of the pain. Someone would have to cut out the root of the boil to eventually get rid of it, or to starve it somehow by purifying the blood or whatever. But just, oh, that feels good. That's complete nonsense. That's not a solution, right? So Jaimini is giving an explanation in Karma Mimamsa. See, in every one of the Saddarshans, the 6 philosophical schools of Vedic philosophy, unfortunately, in modern times, there's a false proponent of it. There's the real Kapila in ancient times, and then there's the modern false Kapila. And everyone has been usurped by a rascal wannabe philosopher in modern times, and is given an atheistic explanation of that genuine Vedic philosophy. Therefore, people are misled. That's why I was never interested by Indian philosophy. I would go into a library of Indian books, and there'd be Nyaya, and Karma Mimamsa, and Purva Mimamsa, and Sankhya, and this thing, and that thing. And I would look at the books, and it was total confusion. And I would say to myself, who is going to understand this nonsense? You know, so I just stayed away from it. But somehow or other, by my luck, I came in contact with the devotees and Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. That was the only time that Indian philosophy ever made sense to me, when I began to read Bhagavad Gita. I didn't understand much at first, but I could tell it was different from all those books in the library, talking about this Mimamsa and that Mimamsa. And that, that was all complete nonsense. It was a waste of time. This is real. Now, how do we know something is real? Because you can practice this and it works. And that other stuff, you can practice this and it doesn't work. That's how you know it's real. So, here, after Karma Mimamsa, then they say that action is not independent because action is performed by some performer. Therefore, the performer himself is the cause of his own happiness or distress. In the Bhagavad Gita 6.5, also it is confirmed that by one's mind, freed from material affection, one can deliver himself from the sufferings of material pangs. So one should not entangle oneself in matter by the mind's material affections. Thus, one's own mind is one's friend or enemy in one's material happiness or distress. So now here we're coming into another issue, that although they give a false explanation, some of what they say is true. So, but what they're doing is giving the half chicken. They're not giving the whole chicken, right? So, just like there was a farmer and his son, one day they were looking at the chicken coop, and the boy said, "You know, Dad, I think if we cut the head off of the chicken, then we won't have to feed him anything, and we can just get the egg." And he said, "Sonny, you better go back to school, because you got a misconception about how to be a farmer. You don't cut the head of the chicken off, you idiot." So that's the philosophy of the half chicken, right? Let's cut the head off and just get the egg. You know, it doesn't work like that. So part of what they say is true. Just like I could teach the Bhagavad Gita 99.9% correctly, right up to the last verse, Sarvadharman Parityajya, Mamekam Saranam Vraja, where it says, "Give up all your dharmas and surrender unto me." And the last statement is, and me means me. Me, Harivilas, not Krishna. Me means me, right? So I taught it 99.9% correctly. Everything else I taught correctly. Just that one little thing I changed. But that's enough to ruin the whole thing. So unless we're teaching 100% correctly, and the only way you can do that is simply repeat what Prabhupada has said, you add one thing or subtract anything, something, then it could pervert the whole thing. And that's what these modern proponents of the ancient Saddarshans have done. They've given their own spin in modern times to the ancient philosophy, and they've ruined it. Atheistic, materialistic Sankhiyites conclude that material nature is the cause of all causes. According to them, combinations of material elements are the causes of material happiness and distress, and disintegration of matter is the cause of freedom from all material pangs. Gautama and Kanada find that atomic combination is the cause of everything, and the impersonalists like Astavakra discovered that the spiritual effulgence of Brahman is the cause of all causes. But in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord himself declares that he is the source of impersonal Brahman, and therefore he, the personality of Godhead, is the ultimate cause of all causes. It is also confirmed in the Brahma Samhita that the Lord Krishna is the ultimate cause of all causes. So here we have 6 authentic Vedic philosophies that have been misconstrued in modern times, perverted by false proponents of it, and presented to the public as fact. And therefore people are confused. And therefore whenever you have a discussion, why is there evil if God is good? There's no substantive answer to that. There are a lot of answers, a lot of different opinions, and the same thing is in the Bible. If you read the episode of Job in the Old Testament, Job lost everything he had, and he was a follower of God. God gave permission to the devil to test Job's goodness. So first the devil made Job lose all his material benefits. House, cows, bulls, sheep, everything, lost it all. But Job didn't turn against God. So then the devil said to God, he said, well, that's because I didn't take his family away from him. Let me take his family away from him, then you'll see. And God said, okay, go ahead. So then he took his whole family away. Everybody died. They died one way or the other. Now Job was alone. Now he began to have doubts. Then 3 men came. Each of them was a type of philosopher. And they started having philosophical discussion with Job. This is all in the Old Testament of the Bible. Trying to ascertain why he was suffering. So one of them gave the traditional thing, it's because of your karma. Another one said something else. Another one said something else. Just like here, one person says everything is caused by atomic combination. Another person says it's all due to material chemical combination. Another person says there's a God, but even he is subject to the law of karma. He just dispenses whatever people deserve according to the law. So the law is supreme. And another person, Sankhya, they say, well, there's a God, but he's the inactive Purusha. He puts everything into play, and then he pulls back and is inactive, and then everything goes on by itself. So they have many different spins to what is the cause of suffering in life. And each one is wrong, partially right, and mostly wrong. Okay, so same thing is in the Bible. Finally, Job, he begins to doubt God, and he's on the verge of rejecting God because he feels as if, how can he be a just God when he did this to me, and I can't remember ever doing anything wrong. But finally, Job catches himself before he goes completely to the other side, and he says, in any case, he says, there's something incomprehensible here, and therefore I'm not going to turn against God. He goes right up to the brink where he's going to renounce God, and then he says, I'm not turning against God. I'm going to accept whatever God has given me and just wait for God to reveal why this has happened. I'm not going to turn against him. When he does that, then the whole situation turns around, and all those things that he lost is rewarded. So this is something like the Satyanarayana Katha, where you have the sadhu who's the baniya businessman, and he keeps refusing to do the katha and the puja, But then when his wife does it for him, finally, after he's in jail and he's lost everything, then she does it. And then he gets out, then he comes back, then he starts doing it because he saw that this is the way to perpetuate his material benefits in life. So it's the same kind of story with Job as the Satyanarayana Katha, which has some validity to it, but it's not pure bhakti. It's what you call karma mishra bhakti, bhakti mixed with material desires. Okay, so here though we're dealing with Dharma, the personality of bull, the personality representing Dharma. He's not like Job or not like Sadhu. He's genuinely good. So he's saying, I can't really decide and say that it's Kali that has caused my suffering. There's some unseen forces here, and I'm going to accept it as the mercy of Krishna. There are also some thinkers who believe that no one can ascertain the cause of distress by argumentation, nor know it by imagination, nor express it by words. O sage amongst kings, judge for yourself by thinking over all this with your own intelligence. So the bull is throwing the question back to Maharaj Parikshit. He's saying, look, you're the king. I just gave you some philosophical background why I'm not making any definite statement who has caused this suffering to me. He gave it indefinitely, but he said, you know, there's an indirect cause. It can't happen without the sanction of the Lord. So that's the fifth cause of every action, right? It cannot happen unless the Lord sanctioned it. So there's some mystery why this is happening to me. Therefore, I'm not going to blame anyone. I'm just going to accept it as the mercy of the Lord. So now we come back to tate nukampam, susamik samano, bunjana evadma kritam vipakam, or better to suffer than to protest. See? So the Vaishnavites, the devotees of the Lord, do not believe, as above explained, that nothing can take place without the sanction. Do believe, as above explained, that nothing can take place without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. So this is the fifth factor of every action. In other words, Vaishnavas believe not even a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Lord. Nothing can happen without the sanction of the Lord. He is the Supreme Director, for he confirms in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya chaham fridi sanvivisto, matak smriti jnanam apahanam cha. So I am in the heart of every living entity, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Or Ishwara sarvabhutanam hridye serujana tistati, brahmayan yantarudrani maya, brahmayan sarvabhutani yantarudrani maya. I am situated in the heart of every living entity, and I am directing the wanderings of all living entities who are situated like on a machine, the machine of the material body. And he is directing their wanderings. We're determining how we want to wander. Either we wander by following Krishna's instructions, or we wander by not following Krishna's instructions. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, is a very important verse that says that the living entity, I'm sorry, the 13th chapter, the living entity, no, I'm sorry, the 15th chapter. Living entity is the cause of living entities in condition where are my fragmented parts. Due to the conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. The living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped around the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So the living entity, nature is the cause of the functioning of the body, but the living entity himself, by the type of decisions he makes, is the cause of his happiness and distress. That's Bhagavad Gita, right? And based on those choices that he makes and the actions that he takes, he receives a particular type of nose, ear, eye, skin, tongue, taste, the set of senses, and he's hardwired in a certain way to perceive the world. Just like we talked about, the dog perceives with his nose, so when he sees another dog, he smells the butt. We don't do that. I mean, you don't do that, do you? When you meet another, no, you don't. You don't say, "Let me smell your butt to know who you are." No, you shake your hands. You look at them in the eyes. You say, "How are you?" You listen to the way they talk, how they smell, how they look, and you make a decision whether it's a good or bad person. The dog doesn't do any of that. He goes and smells the butt, and he can tell whether they're good or bad. He's hardwired like that, you know. And the bee is hardwired to go to stool. I mean, to the nectar of the flower. The fly is hardwired to go to the stool and avoid the nectar of the fire, and so forth. So therefore we see that based on our previous karma, we receive a body that's appropriate only for a certain way of perceiving reality. And is very, very limited. Unless we come in contact with a genuine devotee, and hopefully we have a human body, and then we can get trained to become free of this conditioning. Okay, so the argument of the atheist that one cannot be punished for one's misdeeds unless proved before a qualified justice is refuted herein. For we accept a perpetual witness and constant companion of the living being, meaning we accept it as Paramatma in the heart, and he's the ultimate controller. Upadastranamatra bharta bhukta maheswara paramatmeti chapyukte dehesmin purushat para. He's the overseer, he's the permitter, and everything. So therefore, no one can say there's no witness. There's always a witness to everything we do, and we're always responsible. A living being may forget that he might have done what he might have done in his past or present life, but one must know that in the same tree of the material body, the individual soul and the super soul as Paramatma are sitting like two birds. One of them, the living being, is enjoying the fruits of the tree, whereas the Supreme Being is there to witness the activities. Therefore, the Paramatma feature, the super soul, is actually the witness of all activities of the living being, and only by his direction can the living being remember or forget what he might have done in the past. He is therefore both the all-pervading impersonal Brahman and the localized Paramatma in everyone's heart. He is the knower of all past, present, and future, and nothing can be concealed from him. The devotees know this truth, and therefore they discharge their duties sincerely without being overly anxious for rewards. Besides that, one cannot estimate the Lord's reactions either by speculation or by scholarship. Why does he put some in difficulty and not others? He is the supreme knower of the Vedic knowledge, and thus he is the factual Vedantist. At the same time, he's the compiler of the Vedanta. No one is independent of him, and everyone is engaged in his service in different ways. Now, is there a candle or something in there? No? Is there a light in there touching one of those saris? If there is there light in there? There's no light in there. Yeah, there is. Okay, take the saris away from that light. They can catch fire. And we definitely don't want that to happen. Make sure no light is near any of those saris. Okay. No one is independent of him. Whereas in a liberated state, the living entity, the living being is helped by the supreme spiritual nature and the voluntary loving service to the Lord. There is no incongruity or inebriety in his actions. All are on the path of absolute truth. Bhismadev correctly estimated the inconceivable actions of the Lord. The conclusion is, therefore, that the suffering of the representative of religion, or dharma in the form of the bull, and the representative of the earth, or Bhumi Devi in the form of the cow, as present before Maharaj Parikshit, were planned to prove that Maharaj Parikshit was the ideal executive head because he knew well how to give protection to the cows, the earth, and the brahmanas, religious principles, the two pillars of spiritual advancement. Everyone is under the full control of the Lord. He is quite correct in his action when he desires something to be done by someone, irrespective of the consideration of the particular case. Maharaj Parikshit was thus put to test for his greatness. Now let us see how he solves it by his sagacious mind. In other words, the bull, Dharma, does not attribute fault to the perpetrator of these atrocities. In other words, his 3 legs were cut. The legs of mercy and cleanliness and mercifulness were cut. And only a little bit of truthfulness was left. So the bull is being truthful. He's saying, this could not have happened to me unless the Lord permitted it. If he, and obviously he's permitted it. Therefore, there's some bigger issue here. I don't understand. I don't want to put my finger in it. Therefore, I cannot blame the perpetrator, Kali, for my suffering. Why? Because Krishna has arranged this situation so that Maharaj Parikshit can be glorified as a genuine, bona fide, saintly king by making the right decision how to deal with Kali. It's very interesting. And now we're going to see what he does. Sutta Goswami said, O best among the Brahmanas, the Emperor Parikshit, thus hearing the personality of religion speak, was fully satisfied, and without mistake or regret, he gave his reply. The statement of the bull, the personality of religion, was full of philosophy and knowledge, and the king was satisfied, since he could understand that the suffering bull was not an ordinary one. Unless one is perfectly conversant with the law of the Supreme Lord, one cannot speak such things touching philosophical truths. The emperor, being also on an equal level of sagacity, replied to the point, or meaning wisdom, replied to the point without doubts or mistake. The king said, O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion. In other words, there's this famous saying in English, when you go like this and you point one finger at someone, you're also pointing three fingers at yourself, right? So more or less, he's saying the same thing here. In other words, that destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than a personality. So now, if we applied this every day, on a personal level it works. On a societal level, it would be a big mistake. It would create chaos, right? Because if there are perpetrators and they're genuinely guilty, they have to be brought to justice. But you can make a decision on your own to suffer rather than protest, because you depend on the mercy of God. So there's two things at play here, and we have to be able to differentiate between them. Everything is not one here. So now we'll go forward. A devotee's conclusion is that no one is directly responsible for being a benefactor or mischief monger without the sanction of the Lord. In other words, the devotee's position is Krishna is the ultimate controller. He's giving everyone a certain measure of intelligence and a certain way to perceive reality. He can increase that or decrease it, depending on the goodness or badness of the person. Just like your credit line can be increased or decreased according to how faithfully you pay your monthly payments. If you don't pay them nicely, they'll decrease or take the card away from you. If you pay them nicely, they can increase. So the same thing with our ability to see and perceive reality and our freedom of action. It all can be increased or retracted by the Lord, depending on how we act. But in both cases, he takes it for granted that either benefit or loss is God sent, and thus it is his grace. This is the vision of a devotee. The materialists are different. They say, well, I did this, I did that, I did this, I was clever, I was able to maneuver like this, and I got this through, and I. There's a song in Mexico, ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. This I song, right? There's a proverb in Turkish that says that one who says I is a demon, right? Because they're just talking about themselves. They don't see anybody else in the world. It's just I, right? However, the devotee understands that whatever good or bad happens in life, it's the mercy of the Lord. He accepts it as the mercy of the Lord. He doesn't say, oh, this was good or this was bad. He takes everything as God's mercy. In case of benefit, no one will deny that it is God sent. Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. But in case of loss or reverses, one becomes doubtful about how the Lord could be so unkind to his devotee as to put him in great difficulty. So that was the question with Job. That was the question with Harishchandra. Of course, Harishchandra did not flip. He did not question God. He stayed steady in his performing his duty. But Job, he wavered a little bit, but then he came back to not turning against God, right? And Dharma, of course, Dharma, the bull, he doesn't turn against God at all. Doesn't even doubt for 1 second, right? Jesus Christ was seemingly put into such great difficulty, being crucified by the ignorant, but he was never angry at the mischief mongers. Yeah, Jesus is on the cross, and he says, "Forgive them, God, for they know not what they're doing." He's forgiving his torturers. That is the way of accepting a thing, either favorable or unfavorable. Favorable. Thus, for a devotee, the identifier is equally a sinner, like the mischief monger. By God's grace, the devotee tolerates all reverses. Maharaj Parikshit observed this, and therefore he could understand that the bull was no other than the personality of religion himself. In other words, a devotee has no suffering at all, because no so-called suffering is also God's grace for a devotee who sees God in everything. The cow and bull never placed any complaint before the king for being tortured by the personality of Kali, although everyone lodges such complaints before the state authorities. The extraordinary behavior of the bull made the king conclude that the bull was certainly the personality of religion, for no one else could understand the finer intricacies of the codes of religion. This is amazing. Thus it is concluded that the Lord's energies are inconceivable. No one can estimate them by mental speculation or by word jugglery, as do the false proponents of the modern false proponents of the Saddarshans. A question may be raised as to why a devotee should refrain from identifying an actor or a perpetrator, although he knows definitely that the Lord is the ultimate doer of everything. Knowing the ultimate doer, one should not pose himself as ignorant of the actual performer. To answer this doubt, the reply is that the Lord is also not directly responsible. Wow. Now he's saying the Lord is not responsible, not directly responsible. For everything is done by his deputed Maya Shakti, or material energy. The material energy is always provoking doubts about the supreme authority of the Lord. The personality of religion knew perfectly well that nothing can take place without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, and still he was put in doubts by the deluding energy, and thus he refrained from mentioning the supreme cause. This doubtfulness was due to the contamination of both Kali and the material energy. The whole atmosphere of the age of Kali is magnified by the deluding energy, and the proportion of measurement is inexplicable. Wow, this is a new dimension now to this whole issue. See, now we can understand what happened in Newport, Connecticut, and the resulting controversy that's going on in the country. Some people say it's guns. Other people say it's mental illness. Some people say it's not actually punishing criminals hard enough. But this person had a history of mental illness, and he had a problem with the law also. Other people say it's because the Republicans have the Congress. If they didn't have the Congress, we'd be able to pass all the laws we want to outlaw everything, outlaw breathing, outlaw blowing your nose, outlaw driving. So everyone's got their own explanation, and it's confusion. But here, even though the bull acknowledges that the Supreme Lord is the ultimate responsible person, still he doesn't name the Lord, because the Maya Shakti is also there. So this is very interesting. Let's see how it's going to come out. The material energy is always provoking doubts about the supreme authority of the Lord. Yeah, that's why I say people get bewildered by the manifestation of evil. It makes them doubt the existence of God. How can you say it's a good God when this child was born blind, or this child is born crippled, or these innocent children were executed in a school, gangland execution style? What did they do that was wrong? How can there be a God? Why would God take these children away from their parents at Christmas time? All these questions are being asked. And this has gone on for a long time, that people get bewildered by the evil And it makes them even question the existence of God, just like Job was questioning God. Right? The personality of religion knew perfectly well that nothing can take place without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, and still he was put into doubts by the deluding energy, and thus he refrained from mentioning the supreme cause. This doubtfulness was due to the contamination of both Kali and the material energy. So we're living in Kali Yuga. Everything is contaminated in this age. Everything. So Prabhu, does that mean the deities are contaminated? Does that mean Prabhupada's instructions are contaminated? Well, it means that we can contaminate our understanding of it due to outside influences. Just like some people say, well, you know, I can't be Krishna conscious 24 hours a day. I need a little off time. So what do they do in the off time? Well, you know, they might watch television, or they might eat cake with eggs in it, or they might eat ice cream with eggs in it, or they might be a little teetotaler, take a little bit of wine, in vino veritas. Wine makes the heart happy, you know. Wine is good for the heart. Doctors say that, you know. So in that off time, they might be, you know, on a slippery slope. Let's put it like that. Well, that's contamination. Therefore, people can easily get contaminated in this age. Therefore, it says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We should be serving God 24 hours a day, either in thoughts, words, actions, whatever. However, any little inattention, just like when you're shaving, you go like this, oh no, another cut. Well, I was just a little bit inattentive, right? And what happened? I got a cut. But if you're very careful, then you don't get a cut. But a little bit of inattention, there's a cut. So spiritual life is like walking on a razor's edge. Just like you're tightrope walking, but instead of a tightrope, it's a razor's edge. And if you make a false movement, you're cut. That's how delicate it is. Does that mean it's impossible? No. Does that mean you have to be expert? Yes. How do you become expert? By practice in the association of good devotees. Then you become an expert. Just like, how long does it take to become a heart surgeon? How long does it take to become a brain surgeon? How long does it take to become a Supreme Court judge? It requires a lot of training. Is it impossible? No. Does it require a lot of hard work and dedication? Yes. Is it possible? Yes. You can do heart surgery, and maybe most of the time you don't kill the patient. You know, sometimes you might, but if you're very careful and follow all the procedures, there's a good chance you don't. How about object-oriented programming? It's completely intelligence-driven. Every step, there's checks and balances to avoid human error. Is it possible to do it perfectly? Not perfectly. Even the best companies come out with new programs with glitches in it. But you can eliminate a lot of stupid mistakes by following the process. Right? So, no one's going to be perfect, but you can be near perfect. And for those little mistakes, you're excused. Apichet sudaracharo bhajanti mam ananyabhak sadur eva samantavya samyak vyasito hisaha. Even if one commits the most egregious offenses, if they remain steady in devotional service and not using this verse as an excuse to be a regular offender, if they just have difficulty due to temporary weakness, they can be excused. Once, twice, 3 times. 4th time, it becomes problematic. 5th time, they're out the door. But they can be excused a certain number of times because we're trying to get out of the material conditioning. No one is perfect, and we're going to make mistakes. But as long as those mistakes are not pre-planned, premeditated, and using the philosophy of, oh, the holy name can purify all sins, so let me sin as much as I want, I'll just chant Hare Krishna. No, if you do that, that is an offense, that's called an aparad. But if there's an honest fall down because we're weak, those things can be excused. Okay, so now, in the age of satya, truthfulness, your 4 legs were established by the 4 principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. But it appears that 3 of your legs are broken due to rampant irreligion in the form of pride, lust for women or sense gratification, and intoxication. So these are 3 prominent things today. Pride. I have so much money. I got this car. I got 2 houses. I smoke Cuban cigars. I go to the casino. I eat meat. I do whatever I want because I got so much money. And I got a big 401k, and I got this property in India, and I got a yacht in over here in the Bahamas, and this. Well, the more you have, the more tendency there is to get puffed up with false pride. And what else? Well, lust for sense gratification. Oh yeah, this is my first X, that's my second X, that's my third X, that's my fourth X, and I'm working on my 5th X right now to get rid of her, and I'm thinking about who my next X will be. Well, that's all nonsense. You know, it's all nonsense. And then intoxication, yeah, well, I get some anxiety, let me have another beer. Let me take some Xanax. Let me take some benzodiazepines, you know. Oh, how about medical marijuana? It's legal in Washington State. Yeah, I got a prescription, Prabhu. Well, it's all nonsense. These things increase the deterioration of the spiritual, universal principles of spirituality: austerity, cleanliness, truthfulness, and mercy. So the diluting energy or material nature can act upon the living beings proportionately in terms of the living beings falling prey to the diluting attraction of Maya or illusion. Just like the fly. They see a beautiful geometrical light show called the spider's web on a beautiful summer afternoon. So they're flying around, they're free, right? But the fly sees this beautiful geometric thing, and it's so brilliant and light coming out of it, so it goes, zzz, and it lands on it and says, oh, it's so beautiful, this view. It's so nice. After a little while, it says, oh, I'm bored, I'm going to go. It tries to fly, but the spider made the spider web with its saliva, which is highly sticky. So those little thin legs of the fly get stuck to it. And then as it starts flapping its wings harder and harder, the wings get stuck too in the web. And then it goes and gets more and more stuck. And after fighting like this for a half an hour, it gets totally exhausted. It can hardly move. That's it. So now the spider has been patiently waiting, watching this whole beautiful show. Now that the fly is totally exhausted, the spider starts its dance of death. It's got like 4, 6, 8 legs. Each of those legs, as it touches the spider web, it's like, you know, a 10-ton truck moving on the earth. I mean, the fly is absolutely terrified. And it's coming closer, and then all of a sudden the spider is standing on top of the fly, and you can see the legs around it, and you can see the spider's body and the horrible face. It's like one of those horror movies, you know, the demon that looks like E.T. or something, you know. And the spider is standing there, and it just stands there and looks at the helpless fly, and the fly is looking at the spider absolutely out of its mind with terror. And the spider lowers its stinger and then injects it into the fly and kills it. Now, nature is cruel. Let me tell you, it's very cruel. But the reason we can talk about this is because we can learn from nature. So then the spider will wrap up that fly in the web and then take it and hide it somewhere and eat it whenever it wants to. So we can learn. That fly is us. That web is called Disneyland. $99 a day per person to go in and go deeper into illusion. Some people go to Disneyland and they die there. You know, they're going on these rides that go 60 feet in the air and then they fall down. And they're going up and they're all excited. And then they get up to the top and it falls down right away and they scream, "Ah!" Now, does that sound like fun? No. That sounds crazy to me. Why are they screaming on the way down? Or they go into the House of Horrors, right? Now the House of Horrors, you know, they're going in a little boat, you know, and every 10 feet some demon comes, blah, like that, and they go, "Ah!" Now, why would you want to do that? You see? The House of Horrors. And why would you want to meet Goofy, Dumbo, Daffy Duck, Mickey Mouse? All idiots, right? Well, this is the low level that we've come to, you see. All right, so there is a lot of suffering in nature. Darwin saw this, and it convinced him that it can't be a God. When he saw all the cruelty, you know, he minutely was studying birds and insects and things on the east coast of South America, you know, in the 1850s. He was going from island to island and on the mainland. And he was minutely looking at bugs and things like that, and spiders and things. And he saw, you know, that it's very cruel. And he said, how can there be a God? Well, ask why there's so many species. Where did they come from? Well, we read each one of them corresponds to a certain way of enjoying or suffering in the material world, and it's attributed according to our karma. Just like if you have really bad karma, then you live in a neighborhood where there's drive-by shootings and carjackings and thieves and rogues, you know, and house invasions and things like that. Now, if you get a little bit more money, you move to a nicer neighborhood where there's no carjackings and house invasions, right? Because you can afford it. And then you, instead of driving an old beat-up Chevrolet from the 1960s, you get yourself a brand new Honda or Hyundai or Lexus or whatever. But see, all those houses and cars, they're already existing. It just depends on your ability to pay for it and your desire, what color you want it, what model you want. You see. So the same thing is happening. All the 8,400,000 forms of body are already existing. Reptiles and birds and aquatics and mammals and humans and insects, they're already existing. They were created in the beginning. Now, it depends on what you deserve and what you want. That's why some people are human beings. Next life, they'll be a pig or a dog or a cockroach because that's the way they want it. The pig will eat anything and enjoy with anybody. It doesn't matter, mother, sister, it doesn't matter. Well, in this life, it's sinful to do that. But in order to be able to do that without sin, in the next life, they get a pig's body. Unless we learn to observe these things correctly, we're bewildered by the whole thing. See? And one time I was in a car with this very wealthy Marwari gentleman in Delhi. And we're driving through Chandi Chowk, near Chandi Chowk. And I said to him, I said, Prabhu, I said, take a look out the window. He says, no, I never look I said, why not? He said, it's too painful for me to look. I said, you don't see what's going on out there? I don't care. I said, but it could happen to you. I said, no, don't say that. I don't want to hear that. I'm happy like this. I want to always be born Marwari in Delhi with my family, jute factories and businesses. I don't want to be born any other way. I don't want to go Swarga. I don't want to go Vaikunta. I don't care. I want to be Marwari right here. Well, you see, that is impossible. It's impossible. This is not a permanent situation. Then I told him, I said, Prabhu, at least take care of your health. He said, what do you mean? I said, you have to be careful. You're eating a lot of dalda, greasy stuff. It's not good for your heart. I said, I don't care. He said, all the Marwaris, they go to Houston to this special doctor. He does bypass. If I have any problem, I get on an airplane, I go to Houston, I have my bypass, I come back. Now, is there any rhyme or reason to that type of life? It's completely blind. You say, but people develop these mentalities by bad association, and they ruin their opportunity in the human life to develop understanding of their relationship with God and get free of this whole mess. So with the progression of this age of Kali, people are becoming very proud, attached to women and sense gratification and intoxication. By the influence of the age of Kali, when it says women, it means sundarim. Sundarim means any object of desire. So it could be a man for a woman for a man, or any other combination that you want to imagine, right? Sundarim means an object of desire, with the purpose of exploiting that object or that person for your own sense gratification. By the influence of the age of Kali, even a pauper is proud of his penny. The women are always dressed in an overly attractive fashion to victimize the minds of men, and the man is addicted to drinking wine, smoking, drinking tea, and chewing tobacco, etc. All these habits, or so-called advancement of civilization, are the root causes of all religiosities. And therefore it is not possible to check corruption, bribery, and nepotism. Man cannot check all these evils simply by statutory acts and police vigilance, but he can cure the disease of the mind by the proper medicine, namely advocating the principles of Brahminical culture or the principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. So this is the crux to the question. What is going on inside these two ears? Because we live in the mind. We perceive the world through our mind. We don't exactly see the object. We see some image of the object, and it's perverted when it enters into the mind, and we fantasize on it. Most people live in the mind. They don't really live in the real world or in the material world. They live on impressions they have of the material world. So when the mind becomes corrupted by all kinds of irreligious activities, then it needs to be cured of its disease of misperception of things. How do you do that? What is the treatment? Well, it is these universal principles of religiosity, austerity, cleanliness, truthfulness, and mercy. So modern civilization and economic development are creating a new situation of poverty and scarcity, with the result of blackmailing the consumer's commodities. Blackmailing the consumer's commodities. What does that mean? Well, that means when you water down the milk to make more money, when the milkman waters down the milk, it still looks white, it still tastes something like milk, but it could be 98% water and 2% milk. But if they do it incrementally, very slowly over a long period of time, you don't notice it. And you get used to milk being 2% milk, not 99% milk, you see. Because they trained you over a long period of time. They started with real milk, but now the Gujaratis are delivering, 98% water to the people in Bombay, right? And they call it milk. That's what's happening. This is the blackmailing the commodities. Blackmailing the consumers' commodities. If the leaders and the rich men of the society spend 50% of their accumulated wealth mercifully for the misled mass of people and educate them in God consciousness, the knowledge of Bhagavatam, certainly the age of Kali will be defeated in its attempt to entrap the conditioned souls. Well, this is what rich people should do, or people who earn more than they need. They should use that extra money in helping to educate people in austerity, cleanliness, mercifulness, truthfulness, or Krishna consciousness. Then there will not be any envy, there will not be any class warfare, because everyone will be working toward the same goal, that is to please Krishna, and everyone will be helping each other. The poor man with his work, the rich man with his money and his compassion, and they all work together. It's one big happy family. It's called Achyuta Gotra, Krishna's family. We must always remember that false pride or too high an estimation of one's own values of life, undue attachment to sense gratification or to enjoying pretty women or association with them or with people who are addicted to them, and an intoxication will divert human civilization from the path of peace. However much the people clamor for peace in the world. Well, we're seeing that today. Everyone's saying we want Shanti, we want peace, we want world peace, United Nations, blah, blah, blah. But there's more and more war, more and more violence. Because the mind of people has become corrupted in this age. You can't have pornography, you can't have nonsense movies, nonsense video games, people feeding on violence all the time and expect them to be peaceful. People feeding on pornography all the time and expect them to be peaceful. It's not possible. Absolutely not possible. Because whatever you perceive in here, that's what you're going to seek out there. And if we perceive all these images of degraded life, and we enjoy them, just like the Colosseum in Rome. Roman society degraded so bad that in the last 200, 300 years, they built this Colosseum in which there were basically human sacrifices, live, not a movie, but the real thing. And people went for entertainment. They would get drunk while people were being killed in front of their eyes, and they enjoyed it. That was entertainment. Well, it's the same thing now with the movies that people see. They're watching people get murdered, and they call that entertainment. The preaching of the Bhagavatam principles will automatically render all men austere, clean, both inside and outside, merciful to the suffering, and truthful in daily behavior. That is the way of correcting the flaws of human society, which are very prominently exhibited at the present moment. You are now standing on one leg only, which is your truthfulness, and you are somehow or other hobbling along. But quarrel personified Kali, flourishing by deceit, is also trying to destroy that leg. So the little bit of truthfulness that exists today is also under attack, and eventually will be completely eradicated. So then there's nothing to stop the progression of Kali Yuga. The principles of religion do not stand on some dogmas or man-made formulas, but they stand on four primary regulative observances, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. The mass of people must be taught to practice these principles from childhood. Austerity means to accept voluntary things which may not be very comfortable for the body, but are conducive for spiritual realization. For example, fasting. Fasting twice or 4 times a month is a sort of austerity which may be voluntarily accepted for spiritual realization only, and not for any other purpose, political or otherwise. Fastings, which are meant for self-realization, fasting which are meant not for self-realization but for some other purposes, are condemned in the Bhagavad Gita 17:5 and 6. Similarly, cleanliness is necessary both for the mind and for the body. Simple bodily cleanliness may help to some extent, but cleanliness of the mind is necessary, and it is effected by glorifying the Supreme Lord. No one can cleanse the accumulated mental dust without glorifying the Supreme Lord. A godless civilization cannot cleanse the mind because it has no idea of God, and for this simple reason, people under such a civilization cannot have good qualifications. However, they may be materially equipped. We have to see things by their resultant action. The resultant action of human civilization in the age of Kali is dissatisfaction. So everyone is anxious to get peace of mind. This peace of mind was complete in the Satya age, or Satya Yuga, because of the existence of the above-mentioned attributes of the human beings. Gradually, these attributes have diminished in the Treta Yuga to 3/4, in the Dwapara Yuga to half, and in the age of Kali to 1/4, which is also gradually diminishing on account of prevailing untruthfulness. By pride, either artificial or real, the resultant action of austerity is spoiled. By too much affection for female association, cleanliness is spoiled. By too much addiction to intoxication, mercy is spoiled. And by too much lying propaganda, truthfulness is spoiled. The revival of Bhagavad Dharma can save human civilization from falling prey to evils of all description. So the meat eating destroys, it's the same, is synonymous with pride. And it spoils the possibility of engaging in austerity. Okay, so these four principles, austerity spoiled by pride and meat eating, sense gratification spoils cleanliness, and addiction to intoxication spoils mercy, and gambling and philosophical speculation spoils truthfulness. Okay? The burden of the earth was certainly diminished by the personality of Godhead and by others as well. When he, or God, or Krishna was present as an incarnation, all good was performed because of his auspicious footprints. Now she, the chaste one, being unfortunately forsaken by the personality of Godhead, meaning Bhumi Devi, personality of the earth in the form of a cow, laments her future with tears in her eyes, for now she is being ruled and enjoyed by lower class men who pose as rulers. Maharaj Parikshit, who could fight 1,000 enemies single-handedly, thus pacified the personality of religion and the earth. Then he took up his sharp sword to kill the personality of Kali, who is the cause of all religion. Well, even though they did not signal out Kali as the cause, he understood. Because he actually witnessed it. He saw Kali beating the bull, the last leg of the bull, and he stopped him. Now he questioned them. Now he's convinced he's going to do something about it because he's a real king. A real king does not say, well, we can't stop people from drinking, so let's tax them. We can't stop people from smoking marijuana. Let's tax them. Let's make it legal and tax them. And we use the taxes to build more schools in which we teach more kids that they come from monkeys, so they end up becoming materialists when they grow up. Well, you know, building more schools, building more hospitals in which you train people, little kids, to become atheists, and you give people mercury-laced preservatives to cure their sickness, that's not really doing something good. And getting the money from the sinful activity means the whole enterprise is tainted with that sin. Rather, close the liquor shops. Stop the wholesale slaughter of animals and the brutality of meat eating and violence and intoxication and mercifulness. Try and help the people. Get rid of the gambling. Why? Instead of getting rid of it, they're increasing it. Gambling doesn't help society. Oh no, we're building schools. We're supporting education. We're building orphanages. We're building this thing and that thing. Yeah, you're building it, but along with all that technological advancement, the people are degrading. What are you going to do? Oh, we're going to build more prisons. Oh, good. And what else are you going to do? Well, we're going to hire more policemen. Oh, good. And what else? We're going to hire more IRS inspectors. What else? Oh, we're going to have more customs inspectors and more TSA inspectors and more what? Every second person is going to be a policeman in this society? That means all the others are all thieves. And the police are also corrupt. So is that a solution? That's a slippery slope downward. That doesn't elevate society. It makes it worse. So nobody's interested. Just like India. India has become a big alcoholic nation now. They're saying, oh, why are these people, molesting women in Delhi? Because they're drinking. That's why. It's real simple. They're drinking and watching rubbish movies. Why do you think they're doing it? If they didn't do it, they didn't learn those things from the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. They learned it from the Bollywood movies. See, they came out with the Ramayana and Mahabharata first to train people to watch television. But the Mahabharata only lasted a short time. Now they're watching ending movies, one after another, each one worse than the other. Bollywood is greater than Hollywood now for nonsense and rubbish. Anyway, you want to know the cause. The cause is not, poverty or things like that. The cause is degradation, and the politicians are supporting it because they're making money. Even the members of the VJP, many of them own liquor licenses. They're making money off of liquor. So how can they be the protectors of Hindu Dharma? It's nonsense. So unless people wake up, and actually, refuse to be misled anymore, first we have to follow the principles of Dharma ourselves under proper guidance of bona fide devotees. Then we can actually do something. Otherwise, the blind leading the blind, we all end up in a ditch. Okay, so the personality of Kali is he who deliberately commits all kinds of sinful acts which are forbidden in the revealed scriptures. This age of Kali will certainly be full of all activities of Kali, but this does not mean that the leaders of society, the executive heads, the learned and intelligent men, or above all the devotees of the Lord, should sit down tightly and become callous to the reactions of the age of Kali. In the rainy season, certainly there will be profuse rainfalls, but that does not mean that men should not take means to protect themselves from the rains. It is the duty of the executive heads of state and others to take all necessary actions against the activities of Kali, or the persons influenced by the age of Kali. And Maharaj Parikshit is the ideal executive head of the state, for at once he was ready to kill the personality of Kali with his sharp sword. The administrators should not simply pass resolutions for anti-corruptional steps, but they must be ready with sharp swords to kill the persons creating corruptions from the angle of vision of the recognized Shastras. The administrators cannot prevent corrupt activities by allowing wine shops. They must at once close all shops of intoxicating drugs and wine and force punishment, even by death, for those who indulge in habits of intoxication of all description. That is the way of stopping the activities of Kali, as exhibited herein by Maharaj Parikshit, the Maharata. Well, this sounds like Ayatollah Khomeini here. But no, it's a fact. You're not going to help society by proliferating the number of wine shops. You're not going to control it by regulating it with taxes. But you can, if it's actually good for people, then it should be permitted. But if it's not good for people, then why would you permit it? If it's going to create mental sickness, violence, merciless killings and things like that, well, why would you permit such a thing? Just because you make money from it? Is that the excuse? That's not in the interest of the people. It's not in the interest of future generations. When the personality of Kali understood that the king was willing to kill him, he at once abandoned the dress of a king and, under pressure of fear, completely surrendered to him, bowing his head. So when Maharaj Parikshit was ready to kill the personality of Kali, who had broken 3 legs of Dharma and was making Bhumi Devi cry, he was ready to kill him. Then when he saw that the king really meant business, he surrendered. The royal dress of the personality of Kali is artificial. So in other words, in this age, low-class people get positions of president, of CEO, of the most famous actor, or the best rock group. They're actually representatives of Kali, and they degrade the society by their example. The royal dress is suitable for a king or kshatriya, but when a lower class man artificially dresses himself as king, his real identity is disclosed by the challenge of a bona fide kshatriya, like Maharaj Parikshit. A real kshatriya never surrenders. He accepts the challenge of his rival kshatriya, and he fights either to die or to win. Surrender is unknown to a real kshatriya. In the age of Kali, there are so many pretenders dressed and posed like administrators or executive heads, but their real identity is disclosed when they are challenged by a real kshatriya. Therefore, when the artificially dressed personality Kali saw that to fight Maharaj Parikshit was beyond his ability, he bowed his head like a subordinate and gave up his royal dress. Well, that's something like what's happening in the Arab Spring, right? Presidents, dictators, they're falling. The people are revolting against them. Unfortunately, what they replaced them with is not much better, so it doesn't really help the common people. Maharaj Parikshit, who was qualified to accept surrender and worthy of being sung in history, did not kill the poor surrendered and fallen Kali, but smiled compassionately, for he was kind to the poor. Even an ordinary kshatriya does not kill a surrendered person. And what to speak of Maharaj Parikshit, who was by nature compassionate and kind to the poor. He was smiling because the artificially dressed Kali had disclosed his identity as a lower class man, and he was thinking how ironic it was that although no one was saved from his sharp sword when he desired to kill, the poor lower class Kali was spared by his timely surrender. Maharaj Parikshit's glory and kindness are therefore sung in history. He was a kind and compassionate emperor, fully worthy of accepting surrender even from his enemy. Thus the personality Kali was saved by the will of Providence. The king thus said, "We have inherited the fame of Arjuna. Therefore, since you have surrendered yourself with folded hands, you need not fear for your life, but you cannot remain in my kingdom, for you are the friend of irreligion." The personality Kali, who is the friend of all kinds of irreligiosities, may be excused if he surrenders. But in all circumstances, he cannot be allowed to live as a citizen in any part of a welfare state. The Pandavas were entrusted representatives of the personality Godhead, Lord Krishna, who practically brought into being the battle of Kurukshetra, but not for any personal interest. He wanted an ideal king like Maharaj Yudhisthira and his descendants like Maharaj Parikshit to rule the world, and therefore a responsible king like Maharaj Parikshit could not allow the friend of irreligiosity to flourish in his kingdom at the cost of the good fame of the Pandavas. That is the way of wiping out corruption in the state, and not otherwise. The friends of irreligiosity should be banished from the state, and that will save the state from corruption. If the personality Kali, irreligion, is allowed to act as a man-god or an executive head, certainly irreligious principles like greed, falsehood, robbery, incivility, treachery, misfortune, cheating, quarrel, and vanity will abound. Well, that's what we have today, unfortunately, because we don't have any real leaders. The principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, as we have already discussed, may be followed by the follower of any faith. There is no need to turn from Hindu to Mohammedan to Christian or some other faith and thus become a renegade and not follow the principles of religion. The Bhagavatam religion urges following the principles of religion. The principles of religion are not the dogmas or regulative principles of a certain faith. Such regulative principles may be different in terms of the time and place concerned. One has to see whether the aims of religion have been achieved. Sticking to the dogmas and formulas without attaining the real principles is not good. A secular state may be impartial to any particular type of faith, but the state cannot be indifferent to the principles of religion as above mentioned, meaning these universal principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. Those are universal principles. They're not particular to one religion, but a religion can be judged by the content, degree of content of these four principles. But in the age of Kali, the executive heads of state will be indifferent to such religious principles, and therefore, under their patronage, the opponents of religious principles, such as greed, falsehood, cheating, and pilfery, will naturally follow, and so there will be no meaning to propaganda crying to stop corruption in the state. Yeah, one of the leaders in India, it was on the news yesterday, the poor girl died in Singapore, right? So he said, "And we pledge that this will never happen again." But it happened the same day he He made that pledge. And it happened the next day also. So what is he talking? We pledge it'll never happen again. That's complete nonsense. You know. I mean, don't they realize how foolish they are by saying such a thing? Because why is it foolish? Because they're not going to do anything to eliminate it from happening again. They're not going to close the liquor shops. They're not going to stop the pornography. They're not going to stop all the man gods in India. Every taxi driver in Delhi is an incarnation of Bhagavan now. You know. They make more money as Bhagavan than they do as driving a taxi. So they wake up and they say, I'm starting a new religion, I'm Bhagavan. You know, so who's regulating that? Nobody's regulating all those things. Therefore, how are they going to stop these things from happening? Therefore, O friend of your religion, you do not deserve to remain in a place where experts perform sacrifices according to truth and religious principles for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the central point in pleasing Krishna is ascertained in the Bhagavatam, and it is truthfulness. The basic principle of religion is truthfulness, and the ultimate goal of all religions is to satisfy the Lord. In this age of Kali, the greatest common formula for sacrifice is the Sankirtan Yajna, chanting the holy names of God, especially the Hare Krishna mantra. That is the opinion of the experts who know how to propagate the process of Yajna. Lord Chaitanya preached this method of Yajna, and it is understood from this verse that the sacrificial method of Sankirtan Yajna may be performed anywhere and everywhere in order to drive away the personality of Kali and save human society from falling prey to the influence of the age. Yeah, so starting tomorrow, we have 3 days of Harinam Sankirtan Yajna in the temple. And invite everyone to come and chant Hare Krishna on beads, chant in kirtan continually to usher in the new year of hope and not despair. Right. Well, there's hope if we follow Krishna's advice, and there's despair if we don't. So the basic principle is truthfulness. What does that mean? Truthfulness means acknowledging 3 things. I'm very insignificant. God is great. My real identity is I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. And my essential relationship with Krishna is through practical devotional service. And I can learn practical devotional service, how to render it favorably to the Lord by coming to the temple and taking instruction from the parampara. Evam parampara praptam imam rajasayo vidu. Sakalina mahata yoganasta prarantava. So Krishna explained to Arjuna, imam vivasvate yogam proktavam aham avayam. So vivaswan manave prahur manur iksvakave pravit. In the beginning of time, I spoke this imperishable science of Bhagavad Gita to Vivaswan, the deity of the sun. Vivaswan spoke to Manu, Manu to the first king of the earth, Ikshvaku, and Ikshvaku to his sons and so forth. And it's come down to today. This is called parampara, the succession of perfect Vedic acharyas or teachers or disciples, a disciplic succession. Therefore, but in the time of Arjuna, the Lord says that parampara was broken. Therefore, he reestablished it by speaking again the same Bhagavad Gita that he spoke to Vivaswan millions and millions of years ago, to Arjuna 5,000 years ago, to reestablish. And today we're reading that same Bhagavad Gita. How do we know it's the same? Because if you read it under proper guidance, you come to the same conclusion as Arjuna, that I should surrender to Krishna. I should become his devotee, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I'm his eternal servant, and my relationship with God is through practical service. That's the conclusion Arjuna came to, and we can get that same conclusion by reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, Yata Rup. That's why this temple exists, because somehow or other we got that conclusion by reading Prabhupada's translation and commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, now we're almost finished here. In all sacrificial ceremonies, although sometimes a demigod is worshipped, the Supreme Lord Personality of Godhead is worshipped because he is the supersoul of everyone and exists both inside and outside like the air. Thus it is he only who awards all welfare to the worshippers. It is even sometimes seen that demigods like Indra and Chandra are worshipped and offered sacrificial awards. Yet the rewards of all such sacrifices are awarded to the worshipper by the Supreme Lord, and it is the Lord only who can offer all welfare to the worshipper. The demigods, although worshipped, cannot do anything without the sanction of the Lord, because the Lord is the supersoul of everyone, both moving and non-moving. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.23, the Lord himself, or Lord Krishna, confirms in the following sloka, Yepyanya devata bhakta yajante shadayanvita tepi mam evakonteya yajanti avidi purvakam. Whatever a man may sacrifice to other gods, or meaning the demigods, O Lord, O son of Kunti, is really meant for me alone, Krishna says, but is offered without true understanding. Avidi purvakam. The fact is that the Supreme Lord is one without a second. There is no God other than the Lord himself. Thus the Supreme Lord is eternally transcendental to the material creation. But there are many who worship the demigods like the sun, the moon, and Indra, who are only material representatives of the Supreme Lord. These demigods are indirect, qualitative representations of the Supreme Lord. A learned scholar or devotee, however, knows who is who. Therefore, he directly worships the Supreme Lord and is not diverted by the material, qualitative representations. Those who are not so learned worship such qualitative material representations, but their worship is unceremonious because it is irregular. Sri Sutta Goswami said, the personality of Kali, thus being ordered by Maharaj Parikshit, began to tremble in fear. Seeing the king before him like Yamaraj, ready to kill him, Kali spoke to the king as follows. So this is very dramatic. And we should trust these Vedic authorities. Sukadeva Goswami is speaking this Bhagavatam, and is relating the conversation of Maharaj Parikshit with Dharma, the representative of Dharma, the bull, and Bhumi Devi in form of the cow. And he's confirming what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 9.23, that worship of the demigods is indirect worship of Krishna. And the demigods, the devatas, cannot offer anything to their worshipper that is not sanctioned by Krishna. So one time there was Akbar, he got lost on a hunting trip somewhere in Rajasthan, and he ended up in the desert, very, very thirsty. And he came upon this one poor farmer, not inside the desert, but on the edge of the desert. And he came up to him and said, "Sir, can I have something to drink and eat?" And the farmer said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Akbar." He said, "I thought so." He said, "Sure, come in, but I'm poor. I don't have the type of fine linen and ceramic dishes and cups that you have." He said, "I don't care." He said, "I'm very thirsty, I'm hungry, and I'm lost." He said, "Come inside, sit down on the floor. I don't have any chairs." And he served him in some iron cup, some water, and he served him some simple food. So Akbar said, "I want to thank you very much. You saved my life." He said, "That's all right." I said, "That's why I'm here." He said, "If you ever have any trouble, you come and see me in Delhi. I'll take care of you." I said, We'll see, he said. So Akbar left. He gave him some more water and food to take with him, and eventually he got back to Delhi. So some years went by, there was a severe drought, and this farmer was suffering. So he said, "He'll help me out. Let me go see if he'll keep his word." So he travels up to Delhi. He gets to the door of the Red Fort. He knocks on one of the doors, and the guards come and say, "What do you want?" "Kafir." He was a Hindu, right? So excuse me, he said, "I'm the friend of Akbar." I said, "How can you be a friend of Akbar? You're a kafir." I said, "I know." He said, "But I just want to see him." So, "Who are you?" He said, "Tell him I'm the man that served him water in an iron cup in Rajasthan." They said, "What kind of introduction is that?" He said, "Just tell him." So they tell that to Akbar. Akbar said, "Tell him to come in right away." So they show him into his room, into his private chambers. But it was time for his namaz. So he was praying, "Allah Akbar." And he went down, and came back with his hands. He said, Allah, please, let my enemies all die. May their wives all have abortions. Give victory to my armies. Let my treasury increase with taxes. And so forth. He went through a whole litany of things, what he wants from Allah. Right? So the Hindu gentleman was listening to the namaz of Allah, of Akbar. And then Akbar comes and says, okay, my friend, you're having a difficult time, right? There's a famine. Ask me anything you want. So what do you want? So the Hindu said, you know, I thought I wanted something, but now I'm convinced I don't want anything from you. So then why'd you come here? He said, well, I thought I wanted something from you, but then I heard you saying your namaz, Allah give me this, Allah give me that. So why should I ask from you? You're the beggar from Allah. I'll just ask myself from Allah. You see, he's a smart man. So that's the difference, you see. We should not go through these intermediaries. They can't give anything on their own. And asking them for material benedictions is actually a curse. Because if you get a material benediction from a devata, you're forced to take birth over and over again to get those things, whether it's good or bad. So that doesn't solve the problem. It's like giving medicine in a chocolate-covered pill. The pill itself is bitter, but they put a little chocolate on top of it. And when you taste it, you just taste the chocolate and then you swallow the pill. So you never taste the bitterness of the pill. But it doesn't solve the problem. The problem is we're going to be suffering birth and death continually until we become free of all material desires and desire only to please Krishna. So getting all these material benefits from the devatas is a type of curse. It's not really a benediction. But if we worship the devatas to get the mercy of Krishna, that's different. Then the devata switches and becomes our friend and gives us facility to approach Krishna. Just like a guru will give you facility to understand who Krishna is. Okay, so now Kali is trembling because he sees Parikshit means business. So the king was ready to kill the personality of Kali at once as soon as he disobeyed his order. Otherwise, the king had no objection to allowing him to prolong his life. The personality of Kali also, after attempting to get rid of the punishment in various ways, decided that he must surrender unto him, and thus he began to tremble in fear of his life. The king, or the executive head, must be so strong as to stand before the personality of Kali like the personality of death, Yamaraj. The king's order must be obeyed, otherwise the culprit's life is in risk. That is the way to rule the personalities of Kali, who create disturbance in the normal life of the state, citizens. Well, this might be an argument for a dictator, right? But no, the ancient Vedic rulers were not dictators. They were Rajarsis. They were saintly rulers. Like Ram was a saintly king. Therefore, there was Ram Raja. People loved him because he treated them not like a dictator, but like a father. Of course, one time there were some ill omens in the kingdom in Ayodhya. And Ram called his Brahminical advisors and he said, you know, no, don't put, Prabhu, don't do that. Just take something across, if you can. So, Ram asked, why is this happening? Why are there ill omens in the kingdom? They said, one of the sages said, because there is a very low-class man doing tapasya somewhere in your kingdom. And if he succeeds in getting power through his tapasya, he'll cause a lot of damage. Yeah, why don't they want Iran to have the atomic bomb? Right? Well, they're afraid the Iranians will cause a lot of damage. Of course, Americans already did a lot of damage with the atomic bomb. And how do they know the others won't do? You know, the Israelis won't do damage with their atomic bomb. But You know, they're assuming that the Iranians will cause a lot of havoc if they get the atomic bomb. Okay, so the same thing, he's saying there's a low-class man doing tapasya in your kingdom. So what did Ram do? He went all over the kingdom, and he finally found the low-class man hanging upside down from a branch of a tree, performing severe austerity. He immediately killed him. Now, does that sound right? Well, let's say there's a rat living in your house. What would you do? You would kill the rat? Does that sound right? No?
It's a better situation, alternative.
It's what?
It's a better alternative to kill
than to let him live inside your house and pass stool and urine, and you get all kinds of disease. Well, you have to think about this. Obviously, the rat has a right to live, right? But if you can, by the way, let me tell you about rats, okay? Rats are like little kids. They're very curious. They get bored easily. They like to go around, look, find things, travel around. If they find some food, they'll take the food, you know. So if you can plug all the holes leading into your house, then they'll stay out. But they're like little kids. If they see a little hole, they'll, you know, they're playing all day long, all night long. So they'll go into the hole, and if it leads somewhere that's warm and there's some food there, you know, so they like to go outside and then come back inside and go out. But if you plug the hole up, they won't come inside because they can't get inside. So you have some hole somewhere in the house. You got to find where it is. If you're not expert enough to find it, you call these exterminators. They're expert. The first thing they look for is the holes in the house, and they plug them up. But if you have an evil person living in your house who's planning to do evil things and developing the strength to do it, then what do? Would you do a preventive strike? Like, you know, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, so they did a preventive strike to stop the Iraqis from blowing up Israel, you know. Well, everything has to be based on truthfulness. You have to be, you know, you can't be like Colin Powell and go to the United Nations and lie. If there is actual fact that you know, let's say your neighbor is, I don't know, Muhammad Hassan Ali, right? And he's planning to blow up the Space Needle. And he tells you, he said, my friend, I trust you. Next New Year's Eve, I'm going to blow up the Space Needle. What would you do? Would you call up the FBI? Or would you say, oh, he's my friend, I can't do that? No, you would call up the FBI, right? Because, you know, that would indiscriminately kill so many innocent people, or unsuspecting. I don't know if they're innocent or not, but unsuspecting, right? Yeah. So this was Rama's dilemma. There were inauspicious signs in the country, in Ayodhya. And he got the advice that there was somebody who was unqualified, preparing himself to do evil. And he looked around, and he found the person, and he killed him immediately.
Ravana did the same thing.
Who?
Ravana.
What did Ravana do?
No, he gathered the powers.
Yes, he gathered all that power. He used it for an evil intent. But, you know, he did the damage, and then they had to kill him after that. There was no... he gave him plenty of chances to surrender. I mean, Vibhishan came and surrendered. He didn't reject Vibhishan. But Ravana would not listen to any good advice. So eventually he had to be killed. Okay. So you accept, I think any reasonable person would accept that evil has to be dealt with directly. And you can't play around with it. Well, what is evil? Like, one thing can seem justified to one person and evil to another. So there has to be a criterion by which we can judge evil. So real evil is anything that denies a person the opportunity to understand their relationship with God. So if I program a little kid to believe there's no God, We all come from monkeys or something like that. That's evil. Because that means there's no real ultimate goal in life other than simply gratifying the senses. And to gratify the senses, you need money, and you need this, and you need that, you need gadgets. And it's all, but by that process, one loses the whole opportunity of human life. So somebody has to do something about that. You can't let so many young children be completely misled about the purpose of life. Okay, so Ram killed that person. And in the same way, Parikshit is ready to kill Kali, but Kali very wisely surrenders to Parikshit. And he says, my dear chief of all protectors of religion, please fix some place for me where I can live permanently under the protection of your government. So Sutta Goswami says, Maharaj Parikshit, thus being petitioned by the personality Kali, gave him permission to reside in places where gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter were performed. Now the plot thickens. Right? The basic principles of irreligiosity, such as pride, prostitution, intoxication, and falsehood, counteract the four principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercifulness, and truthfulness. The personality of Kali was given permission to live in four places particularly mentioned by the king, namely the place of gambling, the place of prostitution, the place of drinking, and the place of animal slaughter. Srila Jiva Goswami directs that drinking against the principles of scriptures, such as Sotramani Yagya, association with women outside of marriage, and killing animals against the injunctions of scriptures, are irreligious. In the Vedas, two different types of injunctions are there for the pavritas, or those who are engaged in material enjoyment, and for the nivritas, or those who are liberated from material bondage. The Vedic injunction for the pavritas is to gradually regulate their activities toward the path of liberation. Therefore, for those who are in the lowest stage of ignorance and who indulge in wine, women, and flesh, drinking by performing Sotramani Yagya, association of women by marriage, and flesh eating by sacrifices, are sometimes recommended. In other words, for people addicted to bad habits, the Vedas prescribe marriage, sacred marriage, in which husband and wife remain faithful to each other, but can satisfy on a limited basis, according to Shastra, their material desires. At the same time, work together to make spiritual advancement by satisfying those desires through the Vedic process. And therefore, if they have bona fide Brahmins, they will be trained through the yagyas to also understand the purpose of life. If they, unfortunately, they have materialistic Brahmins, then they just perform the rituals to get money and don't give the people any training. So therefore they degrade, even though they're trying to follow the Vedas. Okay, so one can engage in a type of intoxication called Sotramani Yagya that is ordained by the Vedas and highly limited. One can get married and control those material desires. And one is allowed to eat meat under very restricted circumstances. There is a Vedic yagya. Once a month you can kill one black sheep on the full moon night with the under the guidance of a Brahmin. You have to say a mantra, Mamsata, that is, I'm killing you now, my dear animal, and I acknowledge that in my next life you will kill me in the same way. Now, after you say that, the Brahmin gives you the nod of the head, and then you go, you have to kill the animal yourself, you have to clean the blood, you have to take the skin off, you have to take the intestines and the stool out of the animal, then you can take the flesh home and eat it. In other words, you can't walk into a Safeway and buy meat. That's not allowed in the Vedic. But if you're willing to do all these things, you can eat that one animal a month. You can't, it's not 2 or 3, just that one. So it limits it, it permits it under very restricted circumstances, but with the help of a Brahmin, you're forced to say this mantra and he explains what it means to you. So after a little while, it'll sink in, wait a minute, just to eat this and go through this whole gory experience, actually I am condemning myself in the future for that, for me to become the lamb and the lamb to become a human being, and he's going to do it to me. No, I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it. You see? So there's possibility of trying to satisfy material desires through the Vedas, of getting educated and to see the fault in it. But if you just walk into a Safeway and buy meat, you don't see any fault in it. In fact, you get empowered to do it. Right? So there's no salvation, there's no possibility of salvation, it's just condemnation. So the Vedas are useful in every way, even for people who are highly materialistic. If they're willing to satisfy their desires through the Vedic process of yajna, while they get their desires, they also get some education to overcome or to purify those desires. Okay. Therefore, for those who are in the lowest stage of ignorance and who indulge in wine, women, and flesh, drinking by performing sutramani yajna, association of women by marriage, and flesh eating by sacrifices are sometimes recommended. Such recommendations in the Vedic literature are meant for a particular class of men and not for all. But because they are injunctions of the Vedas for particular types of persons, such activities by the pavritas are not considered adharma. Pavritas are those people who want immediate results. They don't want to work for long-term spiritual benefit. They want to work for short-term material benefit. So, by following the Vedas, they can be gradually, slowly weaned away from that type of low-class behavior to much better behavior. Become purified. One man's food may be poison for others. Similarly, what is recommended for those in a mode of ignorance may be poison for those in a mode of goodness. Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhu therefore affirms that recommendations in the scriptures for a certain class of men are never to be considered adharma or irreligious, but such activities are factually adharma, and they are never to be encouraged. The recommendations in the scriptures are not meant for the encouragement of such adharma, but for regulating the necessary adharma gradually toward the path of dharma. Well, that means the Vedas are a gigantic tent, gigantic umbrella under which all classes of people can fit, and there's a process for educating people to rise up from the lower status to a higher status. It's not based on birth, it's based on education. The spiritual life is always progressive, so therefore everyone is given a chance, regardless of who they are or what their background is, to progress through. Progress in what way? To go from tamas to rajas to sattva and then to suddha or visuddha sattva, transcendental goodness. While one is influenced by tamas, ignorance, and rajas, passion, there's nearly no possibility of becoming spiritually realized. One must come at least to the level of sattva guna, goodness. Samadhamak tapak socham shantirajavamevacha. Jnanam vijnanam sayatam brahmakarma savavajan. You know, one must have equilibrium of the mind, self-control, sense and a tendency toward austerity, and cleanliness inside and out, tolerance, theoretical knowledge, and practical application of that theoretical knowledge in real-life situations. So those are the qualities of people in sattva guna. They have tolerance, compassion, empathy, self-control, indriyate suvairagyam. They're able to control their senses by engaging them in the service of the Lord. Not by denying them, but by engaging them in the service of the Lord. So following in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit is the duty of all executive heads of state to see that the principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, are established in the state, and that the principles of irreligion, namely pride, illicit association with the opposite sex, or prostitution, intoxication, and falsity are checked by all means. So, therefore, it doesn't matter whether one is Muslim, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Hindu, Vaishnava, whatever. These are the four universal principles of spirituality: mercifulness, cleanliness, truthfulness, austerity. If someone is following their religion, then we can examine how much these four universal principles are being practiced in that religious practice. They all contain these principles to different degrees. Like Buddhism follows the principle of ahimsa, not performing unnecessary violence on others, including animals. Right? That's a good principle. Jainism also does the same thing. But in the Hebraic language or the Abrahamic language, religions, they somehow or other have permitted animal slaughter. Right? They have it under regulations, certain regulations. Of course, most of those regulations have been forgotten in Christianity. Judaism has some, and Islam has some. So any religion will prohibit or limit certain types of behavior and favor other types of behavior, so to create a positive mentality for spiritual life. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the religion is. The government must survey or regulate that the people are actually following their religion. And if there are any charlatans, the government has to deal with them. Or if there's any irreligious practice in the name of religion, that has to be dealt with. Not that they deny religion, not that they stay out of religion completely. They have to regulate it so that people actually follow their religion. So if a Muslim says he's a Muslim and he doesn't follow Ramadan, then how can he be a Muslim? And if a Christian is a Christian, but he's going to the casino and he's philandering, how can he be a Christian? Right? Certain things are prohibited. You have the Ten Commandments in the Abrahamic religion. If people don't follow those Ten Commandments, how can they be followers of that religion? So government should not interfere with people's choice of a religion as long as the religion is bona fide, but they should regulate that the people are actually following it. Okay, so now the state which wants to eradicate corruption by majority may introduce the principles of religion in the following manner. 1, 2 compulsory fasting days a month, if not more, for austerity. Even from the economic point of view, such 2 fasting days in a month in the state will save tons of food, and the system will also act very favorably on the general health of the citizens. 2, there must be compulsory marriage of young boys and girls attaining 24 years of age and 16 years of age, respectively. There is no harm in coeducation in the schools and colleges, provided the boys and girls are duly married, and in case there is any intimate connection between a male and female student, they should be married properly without illicit relation. The Divorce Act is encouraging prostitution, and this should be abolished. Well, some people will argue against this. They say, well, what if I married the wrong person and he's abusive and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, there are certain situations that can be accommodated for. Just like when people talk about abortion, they say, oh, you want to abolish abortion? Well, how about women that have been molested? Okay, how many women is that actually get pregnant out of a molestation? How many is that? Is it 0.5% of the population? Is it 1%? So we can make an exception for that 1%, but we don't make a general rule for 100% based on that exception. And so you have to be reasonable. Otherwise, you end up killing, as they're doing now, 1.5 million children every year. In the future, historians will say, well, in the landed in 20th century and through most of the 21st century, a very peculiar behavior came about amongst the civilization, human civilization. They killed their own children. Does that make sense? You kill your own children? That doesn't sound like civilized society. It sounds like barbarian society. It sounds like lions and tigers. They kill their own children. The alpha tiger or alpha lion will kill the little tigers of the previous alpha male and start a new dynasty with the females of only his children. So that's like imitating tiger society or lion society. That's not human society. So we have to be very careful about misinterpreting what's being said here. Yeah, this sounds like a lot of government control of society. Well, previously, it was the family that controlled it. There were arranged marriages, there was separation, boys and girls after they attained a certain age of puberty. It was for the protection of the society. And therefore, I mean, there were always certain tragedies, but in general, it was a very good system. In general, much better than today. 3, the citizens of the state must give in charity up to 50% of their income for the purpose of creating a spiritual atmosphere in the state or in the human society, both individually and collectively. They should preach the principles of Bhagavatam by karma yoga or doing everything for the satisfaction of the Lord. Regular hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam from authorized persons or realized souls. Chanting the glories of the Lord congregationally at home or at place of worship. Rendering all kinds of service to Bhagavatas engaged in preaching Srimad Bhagavatam, and residing in a place where the atmosphere is saturated with God consciousness. If the state is regulated by the above process, naturally there will be God consciousness everywhere. Gambling of all description, even speculative business enterprise, is considered to be degrading, and when gambling is encouraged in the state, there is a complete disappearance of truthfulness. Allowing young boys and girls to remain unmarried more than the above-mentioned ages and licensing animal slaughterhouses of all description should be at once prohibited. The flesh eaters may be allowed to take flesh as mentioned in the scriptures and not otherwise. Intoxication of all description, even smoking cigarettes, chewing tobacco, or drinking of tea must be prohibited. Well, do we want so much government control? If you have a genuine good king who's a pious person who follows himself these principles, gives an example of the benefits accrued by following such a lifestyle, then I think people would be very happy. Just like the United States always criticizes Singapore. They say, oh, Singapore is like a medieval kingdom. They administer medieval justice. Yeah, they caught this one American. Well, like when you go into the country, first of all, before you go through customs and immigration, there's a big, big sign on the wall. They say, if you are carrying drugs, you will be hanged in Singapore. So they warn you before you just landed and you're waiting in line to go through customs, and they tell you, you will be hanged if they catch you with drugs. And they mean it. Then, if you do nonsense in the country, you can get flagellated, whipped, 100 lashes, 200 lashes, or you can go to prison. They don't play around in Singapore, they say. But to live in Singapore, it's a great place to live, right? There's little crime, the economy is good, people are basically happy, there's religious freedom, there's a lot of Hindu temples there, they have mosques there, they have Christian churches, they all live very peacefully together, right? They don't have much crime, the economy is good, but the government is strict with miscreants. Okay? So there was one American guy who got caught doing some nonsense there, right? They whipped him. There's a big outcry from America. Oh, this is medieval justice. This is not democratic. Singaporeans didn't give a hoot about what the Americans said. He said, if any of you come here and act like this, the same thing will happen to you. This is our country, and these are our laws, and we're gonna exact justice for anyone who breaks our laws. It's a great place to live. At least that's what I've heard from people I know who've lived there. We have temples there, The personality Kali asked for something more. He said, okay, you're giving me 4 places, but in your kingdom, these 4 places don't exist. There's no gambling. There's no prostitution. There's no meat eating. There's no gambling in your country. So give me another place. So he said, the personality Kali asked for something more, and because of his begging, the king gave him permission to live where there is gold, because wherever there is gold, there is falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. Although Maharaj Pariksit gave Kali permission to live in 4 places, it was very difficult for him to find the places, because during the reign of Maharaj Pariksit, there were no such places. Therefore, Kali asked the king to give him something practical which could be utilized for his nefarious purposes. Maharaj Pariksit thus gave him permission to live in a place where there is gold, because wherever there is gold, there are the above-mentioned 4 things. And over and above them, there is enmity, jealousy, and hatred also. So the personality Kali became gold standardized. The personality Kali became gold standardized. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, gold encourages falsity, intoxication, prostitution, envy, and enmity. Even a gold standard exchange and currency is bad. Gold standard currency is based on falsehood, because the currency is not on par with the reserve gold. They just keep printing money and they say, oh, we got all the gold in Fort Knox. They don't have the gold in Fort Knox. Anyway, if you go near Fort Knox, you'll get immediately arrested. Right? There are 2 places in the United States that are very highly guarded: Fort Knox and the White House. But you go 2 blocks away from the White House, it's like being in a third world country where you can get murdered easily or robbed easily. So Washington is a very strange place. It is the worst managed state of the Union, because it's managed by the Congress of the United States. It's the worst managed place. It's the worst place to live. Unless you live in a White House. The White House is like Vaikuntha. But as soon as you go 2-3 blocks away from the White House, your life is in danger. You know, or you have to live way outside of Washington, D.C., in Maryland somewhere, you know, these nice neighborhoods out there, then it's okay. But as soon as you live inside the city, you're in big danger. The gold standard currency is based on falsehood, because the currency is not on a par with the reserve gold. The basic principle is falsity, because currency notes are issued in value beyond that of the actual reserve gold. This artificial inflation of currency by the authorities encourages prostitution of the state economy. My God, that's exactly what's happened here. Prostitution of the state economy. The price of commodities become artificially inflated because of bad money or artificial currency notes. Bad money drives away good money. Instead of paper currency, actual gold coins should be used for exchange, and this will stop prostitution of gold. Gold ornaments for women may be allowed by control, not by quality, but by quantity. This will discourage lust, envy, and enmity. When there is actual gold currency in the form of coins, the influence of gold in producing falsity, prostitution, etc. will automatically cease. There will be no need of an anti-corruption ministry for another term of prostitution and falsity of purpose. Thus, the personality Kali, by the direction of Maharaj Pariksit, the son of Uttara, was allowed to live in those 5 places. Thus, the age of Kali began with gold standardization, and therefore falsity, intoxication, animal slaughter, and prostitution are rampant all over the world, and the saner section is eager to drive out corruption. The counteracting process is suggested above, and everyone can take advantage of this suggestion. Therefore, whoever desires progressive well-being, especially kings, religionists, public leaders, brahmanas, sannyasis, should never come in contact with the 4 above-mentioned irreligious principles, meaning intoxication, gambling, illicit activities outside of marriage, and meat eating. The brahmanas are the religious preceptors for all other castes, and the sannyasis are the spiritual masters for all the castes and orders of society. So also are the king and the public leaders, who are responsible for the material welfare of all people. The progressive religionists and those who are responsible human beings, or those who do not want to spoil their valuable human lives, should refrain from all the principles of irreligiosity, especially illicit connection with women. If a Brahmana is not truthful, all his claims as a Brahmana at once become null and void. If a sannyasi is illicitly connected with women, all his claims as a sannyasi at once become false. Similarly, if the king and the public leader are unnecessarily proud or habituated to drinking and smoking, certainly they become disqualified to discharge public welfare activities. Well, ladies and gentlemen, sorry to give you the bad news. Our president is a smoker. He doesn't smoke in public, but he smokes in private. Truthfulness is the basic principle for all religions. The four leaders of human society, naming the sannyasis, the brahmanas, the king, and the public leader, must be tested crucially by their character and qualification. Before one can be accepted as a spiritual or material master of society, he must be tested by the above-mentioned criteria of character. Such public leaders may be less qualified in academic qualifications, but it is necessary primarily that they be free from the contamination of the four disqualifications, namely gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter. Thereafter, the king reestablished the lost legs of the personality of religion, the bull, and by encouraging activities, he sufficiently improved the condition of the earth. Well, we'll stop right there. This is very, very interesting information. It's all in the first canto, and hopefully we'll finish this first canto tomorrow. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask? Yes?
We should accept and not protest if there is suffering. We should accept that suffering given by God for our own enrichment of understanding God. What will be the next step?
What will be what?
What will be the next step from
The best one?
What will be the next step?
We are just accepting. At the same time, we should act also.
Okay, so we always interpret things in a imperfect way. First thing to understand, progressive life is dynamic and progressive. It's not static. So if you say, it's better to suffer than to protest, that sounds like the rest of my life I'm going to be miserable. Is that right? No.
I don't go to the judgment, that's why I'm asking.
Well, okay, but it sounds like that, right? No, because when it's better to suffer than protest, you can only do that if you're cultivating Krishna consciousness, where you have such a deep well of love of God in your heart that you're not disturbed by the suffering. Now, one example in the West is Jesus Christ. He was nailed to a cross. They actually put nails through his palms into the wooden cross. They put nails through his legs into the wooden cross, and he hung like that in the hot sun all day long. Right? He didn't protest. Why? His consciousness was somewhere else. Just like artificially, you can do that also. Let's say you're in pain. So you go to a doctor and say, doctor, oh, I'm in so much pain. So, okay, I'll give you some morphine. He shoots some morphine, and you say, oh, I feel so nice. The pain is still there. But the morphine covers your brain in such a way, puts it on a very low sensibility level that you don't feel the pain anymore. It's sort of dull. It dulls your perception. Well, that's one way of dealing with suffering. The other way is to elevate your consciousness. I mean, the morphine is dulling your consciousness. The other way is elevate your consciousness to something that is so beautiful, so impelling, so enchanting, that it dwarfs the pain. Just like cayenne pepper is called a counter-irritant. So when you have a pain, like let's say you have a joint pain, like arthritis, if you rub a cayenne pepper ointment on it, it creates a greater pain than the pain you're feeling. So you forget about the first pain, by the second pain. You understand? And also, it dulls the nerve connections. So the perception of pain is dulled, you know, in a mechanical way, right? So the brain receptors don't get that perception. So it does two things. It creates a counter-irritant effect where one thing dwarfs the other, and also it blocks the perception of it. Okay. Now that's another way of dealing with pain, but the best way is to elevate your consciousness to such an impelling experience that it dwarfs the pain or suffering. Anyway, pain of, let's say, better to suffer than to protest. So someone insults you. Let's say. Now the best person to insult you is your wife. No one can insult you better. Okay. Now let's say she insults you really good, right? Now, when you have a toothache, can you point to where it hurts? When you have a toothache. Let's say your left molar hurts. Would you point to the left molar? No? If the doctor says, where does it hurt? He said, Doc, it hurts right here, you know. And so he looks in there and says, oh yeah, it's all red. I can see it's all swollen. You know, you pointed to it, right? Okay. But when you were insulted, which part of you hurt?
Brain.
Well, no, it's right. It's the false ego. It's not really you. It's this thing called the false ego. And what is the false ego? So if it's a tooth, you can point to it. If it's a broken leg, you can point to it, right? If it's the false ego that got hurt, what is this false ego? Incorrect perception of yourself, right? Like, for example, if your wife insulted a stranger who was standing next to you, would you feel hurt? No. You wouldn't feel hurt, right? You'd say, well, you know, maybe that guy's a dummy anyway, you know, but I don't care. No, you understand? You are not your false ego. False ego means you falsely identify with the body, with the extension of bodies such as relatives and friends and ethnic identity and language and land of birth and the car you own, the house you own, the clothes you have on, the fillings in your teeth, I don't know what, your earache, your ear device, your glasses, whatever, anything you falsely identify with, things that are asat, not permanent, temporary things that you temporarily think you own, you identify with it, and if something happens to that thing, it hurts you. But what does it hurt? It hurts this false identification. It's not you. Just like one time, I saw an accident. A lady in a brand new Mercedes was run into by a guy in a rainbow-colored VW van. And he got out and he said, hey, dude, I think I hit your car. And the lady got out of the car. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. You idiot, you stupid, you dumb hippie. What did you do? Give me your insurance. I don't got insurance, dude. She went berserk. Now, her mother was in the car too. She forgot about the mother. She didn't ask, she didn't look to see if her mother got hurt in the accident, right? All she saw was the damage to her brand new car. And she went berserk. It hurt her. But she was not hurt in the accident, right? Nothing happened to her. But she expressed herself as if she was in extreme pain. And all this emotional travail, you know, trembling, anger, screaming, cursing. She went berserk. Now, what caused that? Because nothing happened to her. Fortunately, nothing happened to her mom, although she forgot about her mom. She didn't even, it was only about after 10 minutes that she thought, oh, maybe I should see if my mom is all right, right? What caused that? It was her false identification with the car. That's not her. It's false attachment. Whatever happened to the car affected her. That's the false ego. This false concept. I am this body, I am this family, I am this car, I am this 401k, I am this thing, I am this, I am that. So when you get insulted, it's not you that's insulted. It's this false ego, this is the false part of you. It's the things that you identify with, thinking it's you, but it's not you. And when you accept that, anything that happens to that false thing, that temporary thing, it affects you. Now, the solution to the problem is reorient your preoccupation in life to something that's eternal, not temporary. And that's Krishna. Now, it's not difficult because Krishna is very beautiful. Right? He's not ugly. He's very beautiful. Radharani is very beautiful. And their service is very beautiful. And singing for them is beautiful. Dancing for them is beautiful. Their prasad is beautiful. Their katha is beautiful. It's all wonderful. Right? And nothing will disturb you at that point. Because you have something so much better than this other stuff that you've been elevated to a higher... Just like, let's say tomorrow you get on an airplane and you're flying 35,000 feet above Seattle. Now, are you preoccupied by what's happening down here when you're up there? Not really. You're in a different world now. You're 35,000 feet. Although you're still in Seattle, but you're 35,000 feet up in the air. Your mind is in a different place now. You know, the stewardess said, "What else would you like? Would you like another cup of coffee? Would you like a Coke? Would you like this? How about can we bring you food? You want another pillow?" And you're saying, "Oh, I feel very nice here." You know, you say. So you're 35,000 feet in the air, and you're in a different world. So your consciousness can go up like that, and once it goes up like that, you're not affected by what's down here. It's going on. You might be aware of it a little bit, but it doesn't affect you. Because you have something so much better. You know, I mean, you can function down here, but you're not affected by it. Okay? Haribol. Okay, so we're going to have our arti now.